Chapter 868. The other 5 royal elders also knelt down and said in unison, "Third princess, please hold the scepter." Sheng Wanwan looked at the Tianling scepter floating above the black crystal, took a deep breath and walked forward slowly. Finally, she stood a step away from the heavens-writ scepter. Everyone fell silent as they watched the scene unfold before them. As long as Sheng Wanwan successfully held the Tianling scepter, she would be able to ascend the throne. From then on, she would wield the power of the Tianling dynasty. Thump thump, thump thump. Sheng Wanwan's heart was beating violently. It was almost shattering her eardrums. All the blood in her body seemed to be boiling, rushing through her limbs and bones. Because she was nervous, her palms were sweaty, and both her hands were wet and sticky. The Tianling scepter was extremely heavy, and the aura it contained was extremely powerful. After all, it was left behind by Taizu himself. Not to mention lifting it, just standing there made Sheng Wanwan feel a tightness in her chest, and she almost knelt on the ground. To lift it, strength alone wasn't enough. At the same time, one had to have the bloodline of the Tianling royal family. Most importantly, one had to gain the Tianling scepter's approval. To any successor of the Tianling dynasty, this was a threshold that had to be crossed. If they succeeded, they would become a supreme existence above millions of people. If they failed, they would become the laughingstock of the world, and they would never be able to make a comeback. Sheng Wanwan kept persuading herself in her heart. "I can do it, I definitely can." She had made thorough preparations for today, and there was no way she would fail. It was already noon and the sky was clear and cloudless. The scorching sun shone down. And at this moment, Sheng Wanwan became the focus of countless people's attention. Finally, she slowly reached out and reached for the Tianling scepter. Buzz. When it was still half an arm away from the Heaven's Order scepter, a buzzing sound suddenly spread out from it. The Tianling scepter, which was covered in a layer of faint light, suddenly released a powerful aura. Sheng Wanwan was the first to bear the brunt of it, and she immediately took a step back from the impact. She was shocked and quickly stabilized her body. Her feet were nailed to the ground. Fortunately, she reacted in time, and the impact this time did not affect her too much. But in the end, under everyone's watchful eyes, he still took a step back. For a time, the huge square became even quieter. One had to know that at this moment, Sheng Wanwan's performance was seen by countless people. Elder Qin Ku, who was singing the ceremony, also frowned slightly. He was the most senior of the royal family elders, a true veteran of 3 dynasties. He had seen such an occasion 3 times, and this was already the 4th time. In his impression, the first 3 enthronement ceremonies had gone very smoothly. As the symbol of imperial power, the Tianling scepter was a sacred item that the entire dynasty worshipped. It also had spirituality. In the past, during the process of holding the scepter, the Tianling scepter would naturally emit a powerful aura, but it would only do so when the successor tried to pick it up from the black crystal. However, just now Sheng Wanwan's hand had not even touched the Tianling scepter, and it had already caused such a commotion. Elder Qin Ku felt uneasy and felt that something was amiss. Sheng Wanwan thought to herself that it was a close call. She almost fell down just now. However, the Tianling scepter seemed to be more difficult to control than expected. Just getting close to it was already so difficult. Who knew how difficult it would be to try to lift it? She pursed her lips and channeled the force in her body to her right hand. Immediately after, she took another step forward. This time she was even more cautious than before. She used her force to wrap her hand completely and reached for the Tianling scepter. Buzz. The Tianling scepter trembled slightly. The commotion was even greater. Fortunately, Sheng Wanwan had suffered a loss previously. This time she clenched her teeth and decided to endure it. The closer she got, the stronger the aura became. Her entire right hand felt like it was about to be crushed. Sheng Wanwan's face was pale, and her hand was trembling slightly. However, she still resolutely moved forward. Today, no matter what, she had to succeed. Elder Qin Ku watched from the side, and the feeling that something was wrong grew stronger. Strange. Why did the Tianling scepter seem to be very resistant to Sheng Wanwan? He had never seen such a situation before. He frowned anxiously. It wouldn't be good if this went on. It would be extremely difficult for Sheng Wanwan to pick it up. The other elders from the royal family who were standing nearby also sensed something. They looked at each other in unison and secretly exchanged glances. Logically speaking, Sheng Wanwan had royal blood running through her veins. Her talent and strength were also not bad. She should be able to succeed smoothly. However, judging from the current situation, it seemed that Jiang Yuqing stood behind Sheng Wanwan, only 10 steps away from her. Although he couldn't see Sheng Wanwan's expression from here, He could already tell many things from her reaction. His heart was also in his mouth. Everyone at the bottom of the stairs watched this scene nervously. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. From here he could see half of Shangguanwan's face. Her expression wasn't very good. It seemed that lifting the Tianling scepter wasn't that easy for her. Finally, after a long and painful torture, Shangguanwan's hand finally reached into the layer of light and grabbed the Tianling scepter. In an instant, a bone-chilling aura surged out from within. Shangguanwan clearly saw that her entire right hand was instantly covered in frost. Moreover, that layer of ice seemed to be spreading outwards. She was shocked and hurriedly circulated her force to block that icy aura outside. However, her right hand was already red and swollen from the cold. She couldn't feel anything at all. The Heavenly Order scepter was forged by the great ancestor using the 1,000-year-old ice bone wood from the extreme cold of the northern border. This kind of 1,000-year ice bone wood wasn't a real tree. It was formed by condensing the force of heaven and earth and freezing into a tree-like stalactite. It was rumored that it would only grow an inch every 100 years. One could only imagine how terrifying the energy it contained was. Shangguanwan only felt that the chill seemed to have silently spread from her palm to her entire body. For a moment she almost thought that she was going to become an ice sculpture. She knew that she had to pick it up as soon as possible. Otherwise, if this torture continued, she was afraid that her entire body would be crippled. Thinking of this, Shangguanwan gritted her teeth and circulated all the force in her body. She gripped the Tianling scepter tightly and exerted force. "Rise!" Shangguanwan shouted clearly. However, she was shocked to find that the Tianling scepter didn't move at all. It was still quietly floating above the black crystal. No matter how she controlled the abundant origin power to attack it, it didn't move at all. In front of Lang Kuan Palace, everyone who was nervously watching this scene was stunned. Someone quietly said, "Did this fail? Is this a failure?" A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 869. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. This whisper was especially clear. Instantly, it was like a drop of water falling into a pot of oil. The crowd started to stir and many people looked at each other. This did seem to be a little strange. Looking at Shangguanwan's appearance, she should have used all her strength. But the Tianling scepter did not move at all. It can't be. Isn't the third princess a 7th-level fighter? Logically speaking, she should be able to do it. But the Tianling scepter did not move. If the third princess really can't do it today, it will be too embarrassing. The low voices of discussion reached Shangguanwan's ears, and every word made her feel even more embarrassed and tormented. She clenched her teeth and tried again. But the Tianling scepter still showed no signs of moving. The noise below gradually grew louder. The few elders of the imperial family beside him also gradually had a trace of suspicion on their faces. Shangguanwan's heart beat violently, as if it was going to jump out of her chest. In a short time, her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The Tianling scepter in her hand was bone-chillingly cold, but it was not as cold as her heart now. It was as if a basin of ice water was poured over her head. She couldn't help but shudder. She started to tremble. Why was the Tianling scepter not moving? She had risked her life to restore her Yuan meridian. Although it was not the best, it was still at the level of the earth scripture. In addition, she had painstakingly accumulated this strength. How could she not be able to lift the Tianling scepter? Shangguanwan became more and more anxious. But the more anxious she was, the more flustered she became. She wanted to gather all the strength in her body and try again, but for some reason her limbs went soft and she could not exert any strength. But she did not dare to let go. That would be admitting that she could not do it. So Shangguanwan held the Tianling scepter and did not move. Actually, she had been trying to move but to no avail. So in the eyes of the surrounding people, it looked like she was standing there stiffly. Time seemed to pass very slowly at this moment. The few elders from the imperial family looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. The gentle smile on Jiang Yuqing's face could no longer be maintained. If Shangguanwan was unable to pick up the scepter today, she would not be able to ascend the throne. More importantly, she would never have the chance to try a second time. In that case, he would also be greatly implicated. At that time, all the previous efforts would be in vain. He no longer had the chance to find a third royal princess to marry. Don't be nervous. Take it slow. Jiang Yuqing finally couldn't help but open his mouth. At first glance, his expression seemed quite calm, but if one looked closely, they would see the anxiety and worry in his eyes. Shangguanwan looked back at him. She knew very well that Jiang Yuqing wasn't encouraging her, but warning her. She fails. At the thought of the terrifying consequences, Shang Wanwan pursed her lips and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her again. With his current strength, he was afraid that it would be impossible. Then, Senior, could you please help me? Shang Wanwan asked in her heart. After a moment, that cold and indifferent voice sounded. Just as I thought, although your Yuan meridian has recovered, it's still lacking something. After all, your Yuan meridian's grade was not very good to begin with, and after it was destroyed by the flames of the Tianjing Yuan meridian, it was even worse. It was already very difficult for you to recover to your current state. The voice was very calm when he said these words, as if he was narrating a very ordinary matter. But in Shang Wanwan's ears, it didn't sound like that at all. She felt that he was mocking her. A deep resentment grew in her heart. If not for Shang Guanyu, she wouldn't be in such a difficult position now. Your Highness, do you still want to continue? Seeing that Shang Guanwan didn't move, Elder Chen Ke finally couldn't help but ask carefully. The moment he said that, everyone quieted down again and looked at Shang Guanwan with different expressions. If she continued, she might not succeed and she might even be mocked for being incompetent. But if she gave up just like that, it would mean that Shang Guanwan had completely failed. Not to mention ascending the throne, even if she lived as the third princess, her life might not be any better. Those who had failed before didn't have good endings. Shang Guanwan immediately said. Of course. Seeing how resolute she was, Elder Chen Ke wanted to say something but stopped. Actually, according to his past experience, Shang Guanwan was destined to fail. But since she wanted to continue, he couldn't say anything. Third princess, please? Elder Chen Ke's expression became much more serious. If Shang Guanwan still couldn't do it this time, then they really had to consider many things in the future. Shang Guanwan nodded slightly and frowned slightly. Senior. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded beside her ear. Then Shang Guanwan felt a flash in front of her eyes. A vigorous aura suddenly erupted from her body. In an instant, like a river bursting its banks, an endless amount of force surged. A black rune appeared between Shang Guanwan's eyebrows and disappeared in an instant. Due to the special position she was standing in and the fact that the rune flashed too quickly, no one noticed it. Then, a storm seemed to be brewing in the depths of her eyes. Cold. Sinister. It was as if she had become a completely different person. Then she clenched her fists and tried to raise the Tianling scepter again. Buzz. A roar sounded. It shone brightly. In the next moment, the Tianling scepter finally moved. Shang Guanwan's mouth twitched. It seemed to be small, but there was a hint of stiffness in it. The black crystal was instantly filled with colorful lights. And the Tianling scepter started to move slowly along with Shang Guanwan's movements. It moved. The Tianling scepter moved. Someone exclaimed in surprise. The crowd became noisy again. Almost everyone rushed to look, afraid that they would miss something. Seeing Shang Guanwan slowly pick up the Tianling scepter, the stone in Elder Chen Ke's heart was finally put down. The other elders also nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Jiang Yuqing's tightly clenched fists in his sleeves relaxed a little. It's good that she succeeded, it's good that she succeeded. Many people's faces were filled with amazement. The Tianling scepter is really not easy to deal with. The third princess only succeeded after trying so many times. So it's considered a success, right? From now on she will officially ascend to the throne. Boom. At this moment, a huge explosion suddenly sounded from the Tianling scepter. A terrifying wave spread in all directions. Shang Guanwan's eyes flashed with shock. Before she could react, an unparalleled aura came toward her. Shang Guanwan's body instantly flew backward. Bang. She fell heavily and rolled down the 9 flights of stairs. The crowd was in an uproar. However, at this moment, the Tianling scepter suddenly flew in a certain direction. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something. She looked up and saw the Tianling scepter flying toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 870. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The Tianling scepter was extremely fast, leaving a straight silver trail in the air. In an instant, it had already flown out of Lang Kuan Palace. It tore through the air and let out a sharp whistle. The sound of something breaking could be heard. Everyone looked over and was shocked to find that the barrier that Elder Chen Ke had set up had been easily pierced. One must know that Elder Chen Ke was an 8th-level pinnacle fighter. One could only imagine how strong the barrier's defensive power was. But in front of the Tianling scepter, it was like a thin piece of paper that was instantly pierced. Countless people looked up anxiously, their eyes following the Tianling scepter. It flew across the sky and headed straight for the crowd. An astonishing pressure spread out, and many people subconsciously retreated backward. Quick! Retreat! The power of the Tianling scepter was not something that they could easily withstand. Everyone was shocked and panicked. The few elders of the imperial family who were standing on the steps were also panicking when they saw this scene. Elder Qin Ku, what should we do? Should we think of a way to stop the Tianling scepter? Elder Qin Ku clenched his fists tightly and the wrinkles on his face seemed to have increased. Stop it. Easy for you to say. Even if the few of them joined forces, they might not be able to completely control the Tianling scepter. Furthermore, this thing seemed to have gone crazy for it to suddenly cause such a ruckus. He had witnessed 3 enthronement ceremonies but had never seen such a scene. But these were only thoughts in his heart. The situation was chaotic now. If they could not control it in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. Elder Qin Ku pondered for a moment and made a prompt decision. Quick! Activate the black magnetite. The black magnetite was the black crystal that held the Tianling scepter. There was a top-grade Xian formation carved on it and it was specially used to suppress the Tianling scepter. Usually, the Xian formation on the black magnetite was activated and the Tianling scepter was in a state of deep sleep. Only during special times like this would they deactivate the Xian formation on the black magnetite. Once the heir to the imperial family successfully picked up the Tianling scepter and received its approval, the Xian formation on the black magnetite would be activated when it was placed back. But they did not expect that this time they would have to do it. The elders hesitated for a moment. Once it was activated again, the black profound stone and the heaven-writ scepter would not be able to touch each other for a short period of time. At that time, the selection of a new emperor would have to be delayed. However, the heaven-writ scepter seemed to have slipped out of his control. Perhaps this was the only way. The few of them looked at each other and nodded resolutely. With a move of their bodies, they stood around the black mysterious stone and surrounded it. One of them stretched out his hand, and several rays of silver origin power flew out. Open! Wait! Elder Qin Ku suddenly cried out in alarm. The few elders quickly stopped and saw that Elder Qin Ku was looking in a certain direction with a shocked expression. They subconsciously looked over and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The originally orderly and lively crowd seemed to have been split from the middle by an invisible sharp sword. At the end of the crowd stood a woman in red. It was Chu Luiyue. However, the heavenly command scepter actually stopped a foot away from her. For a moment, time seemed to stop flowing, and the surrounding space froze inch by inch. Between heaven and earth there was complete silence. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Their hearts were filled with shock and they were speechless. The heaven-writ scepter was extremely resistant to Shangguan and had mercilessly sent her flying. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. What was the meaning of this? After a short moment of shock, someone finally remembered Shangguan and stiffly turned around to look. At this moment, Shangguan had already rolled down the 9 steps. Perhaps because the energy fluctuation she had encountered earlier was too strong, she had struggled for a long time before she could stand up. However, at this moment she was really in a sorry state. There were several cuts on her face and hands and she was bleeding profusely. Her originally exquisite and beautiful makeup was now completely ruined. Her veil had long been pulled down, and her cloud-like hair was messy. A luxurious phoenix hairpin hung crookedly in a lock of hair. It was unknown whether it was because she had suffered internal injuries, but her face looked incomparably pale. There were some black marks between her brows and the corners of her lips, making her look extremely strange. No one could have imagined that the third Princess Shangguan, who was still glamorous and lofty just a moment ago, would end up in such a state. Some people gradually regained their senses, and their expressions became very complicated. If they remembered correctly, Shangguan seemed to have been sent flying by the heaven-writ scepter's power just now, right? This was no longer a matter of whether she could pick up the heaven-writ scepter or not. This was a matter of enmity with the heaven-writ scepter. Although there had been chances of failure in the past, something like this had never happened before. As the third princess, Shangguan was a true Tianling royal bloodline. Such an action was no different from giving her a ruthless slap in front of so many people. Shangguan also felt extremely embarrassed. Her limbs were cold and the blood in her body seemed to have frozen. Only her face was burning with pain. At this moment, everyone's gazes seemed to be filled with mockery and ridicule. Her mind kept replaying the scene just now, and she couldn't help but want to find a hole to hide in. Completely disappear. How are you? Jiang Yuqing reacted quickly and immediately walked over to Shangguan's side as he asked with furrowed brows. Shangguan was just about to speak when the blood in her chest surged, and she actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Jiang Yuqing was standing right beside her, and a lot of the blood splattered on him. His brows furrowed, but he still reached out to support Shangguan. Shangguan couldn't be bothered with him at this moment. After spitting out the blood, she still stubbornly and quickly raised her head to look at Chu Luiyue in the crowd. "Why is the heaven-writ scepter?" She spat out a few words with difficulty, her eyes staring straight ahead. The hatred in her eyes was like a knife, as if she wanted to cut Chu Luiyue into pieces. Jiang Yuqing also looked over with furrowed brows. How could he not be curious? In fact, at this very moment, everyone who saw this scene both inside and outside of the huge Langkuan Hall was similarly puzzled. When did Chu Luiyue have anything to do with the Tianling scepter? Why did it fly towards her out of nowhere? Especially when compared to Shangguan, this scene looked even more strange. Jiang Yuqing's expression was grave. "This Tianling scepter is extremely dangerous. Be careful." Before he finished speaking, the Tianling scepter seemed to have understood. It suddenly retracted the murderous aura around it and moved forward. It seemed to be trying to curry favor and act coquettishly. It gently poked Chu Luiyue's face. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 871. Jiang Yuqing's remaining words were stuck in his throat, and he almost choked to death. The expression on his face changed. How exciting. When the crowd saw this scene, they didn't react any better than Jiang Yuqing. They were all stunned. What was going on? Wasn't the Tianling scepter supposed to be majestic and inviolable? Wasn't it supposed to be that only the one who raised the Tianling scepter could wield imperial power and ascend to the top? Why did it suddenly become like this? The Tianling scepter was very domineering just a moment ago, sending the third princess flying. In the next second it actually, in front of Chu Luiyue. Wasn't this too strange? The surroundings were extremely quiet. Countless pairs of eyes landed on Chu Luiyue with different expressions. Chu Luiyue was actually shocked herself. When she saw the Tianling scepter flying towards her, she had already guessed something in her heart. She just didn't expect it to treat her even more intimately than expected. Yes, intimately. When it flew in front of her and poked her face, the first thought that came to Chu Luiyue's mind was, the Tianling scepter seems to like her very much. This feeling came out of nowhere, but it was very real. Chu Luiyue blinked and looked at the Tianling scepter in front of her. At this moment, it was still enveloped in a layer of faint light. However, because it was very close to her, she could roughly see what it looked like. It was a cylindrical scepter that was completely black. It was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, and it was about 3 feet long. There seemed to be a dragon's head carved on the top, and the tail was sharper and seemed to be carved with some kind of pattern. Even though it had already restrained its aura, she could still vaguely feel the vast and majestic aura that seemed to come from an ancient time and space. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the Tianling scepter was indeed coming for her. For a moment, an impulse surged in her heart, and she almost reached out to grab it. However, she didn't forget where she was, and she also didn't forget that there were countless pairs of eyes staring at her. Just as she was about to suppress the thoughts in her heart, a sharp voice filled with anger suddenly rang out. Chu Luiyue, how dare you? This shout was extremely ear-piercing, and it instantly caused many people to be jolted awake. Chu Luiyue also looked over. The person who spoke was Shangguan. At this moment she was glaring at Chu Luiyue furiously. Her eyes were wide open and she looked furious. The Tianling scepter is a sacred object that the Tianling dynasty has worshipped for thousands of years. It is the symbol of imperial power. How can I allow you to defile me like this? Many people's expressions instantly changed. As long as one wasn't blind, they could clearly see that the heavens-writ scepter had flown towards Chu Luiyue of its own accord. It had also approached Chu Luiyue of its own accord. From the beginning to the end, Chu Luiyue stood in his position and did nothing. Shangguan once said that she had defiled the heavenly writ scepter. Isn't that a bit of a distortion of the truth? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Instead of being angry, she smiled and said softly, "Third princess, do you mean that I was the one who summoned the heavens-writ scepter and controlled it to do all those things just now?" Shangguan choked. If she said yes, wouldn't that mean that she had admitted that the heavens-writ scepter was controlled by a mere Chu Luiyue? If word got out, wouldn't the imperial family lose face? But if she said that it wasn't the heavens-writ scepter, why did it suddenly become so strange? It had rejected her approach and even injured her directly. But in the blink of an eye, it was so docile in front of Chu Luiyue. Even in the thousands of years of the Tianling dynasty's history, Nothing like this had ever happened before. The most embarrassing thing was that the heaven's writ scepter was still quietly floating beside Chu Luiyue. It was as if it was set on following her and had no intention of returning. She was going to pick up the heaven's writ scepter. What was she going to do now? Sheng Wanwan's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Luiyue again. The night before, Jiang Yuqing poured out his heart to her and took the initiative to ask for her hand in marriage. Now, even the heaven's writ scepter had taken the initiative to follow him and stay by his side. Who knows if you use some kind of trick? Sheng Wanwan was almost blinded by anger. She pointed at Chu Luiyue and wanted to scold her, but Jiang Yuqing quickly stopped her. Calm down. He grabbed Sheng Wanwan's hand tightly and gave her a warning look. She should take a look at herself first. If she lost control of her emotions again and made a scene, it would be over. Sheng Wanwan bit her lip hard to control her emotions. Jiang Yuqing looked deeply at Chu Luiyue and the heaven's writ scepter in front of her. His mind was also in a mess. Elder Qinku. He called out. You have always been in charge of looking after the heaven's writ scepter. Do you know what is going on? Elder Qinku, who was called out, immediately walked over with a worried expression. This humble subject doesn't know what is going on either. The heaven's writ scepter rarely leaves the black mystic stone. You are the leader of the 8 great elders of the royal family and are personally in charge of these matters. If even you don't know, then who else can? Jiang Yuqing's tone turned cold. No matter what, you must bring the heaven's writ scepter back. If you delay the 3rd princess's ascension ceremony, you will be held accountable. Elder Qinku also cried out in his heart. What did this have to do with him? Not to mention that the heaven's writ scepter had taken the initiative to look for Chu Luiyue and no one could do anything about it. Even if Chu Luiyue wasn't here, would Sheng Wanwan be able to lift it? Everything that had happened just now was still vivid in his mind. The heaven's writ scepter was full of resistance toward Sheng Wanwan and wasn't even willing to let her touch it. Not to mention anything else. It would even delay her ascension ceremony. That would require her to have the ability to ascend the throne. Without the heaven's writ scepter's approval, today's ceremony couldn't possibly continue. Elder Qinku's expression turned a little pale at this thought. Prince Consort, it's true that we are in charge of guarding the heaven's writ scepter, but we have never been able to control it. Please forgive my incompetence, but I may not be able to do as you say. Jiang Yuqing immediately became anxious. Sheng Wanwan was even angrier when she heard this. She immediately raised her voice and pointed at Chu Luiyue. No matter what, you must bring the heaven's writ scepter back to the black mystic stone. Otherwise, how can I continue? Elder Qinku clasped his hands together and bowed. He said word by word, he said each word clearly. 3rd princess, you know that the heaven's writ scepter is a sacred item that has been passed down for thousands of years and has its own spirituality. If it acknowledges you, it will naturally agree to your request. No matter where it is, you will be able to lift it. It doesn't have to be on the black mystic stone. However, if it doesn't acknowledge you, then even we can't do anything about it. Sheng Wanwan's face flushed red. Was he openly saying that she didn't have the right to inherit the throne? She clenched her fists and looked at Chu Luiyue. I order you to return the heaven's command scepter immediately. I order you to return the heaven's command scepter immediately. Chapter 872. This scene was simply too absurd and laughable. Sheng Wanwan was clearly the one with the royal bloodline and the heir to the throne, but now she was coldly reprimanding Chu Luiyue, who had nothing to do with her, and demanding that she return the Tianling scepter. If word got out, who knew how many people would laugh their heads off? Chu Luiyue was calm and composed as she lifted her chin. 3rd princess, I did not take the Tianling scepter for myself, so how can I return it? If you want it back, why don't you come and get it yourself? Sheng Wanwan choked as her face flushed red. If it was really as easy as Chu Luiyue said, why would she have such a headache? This Tianling scepter was indeed a little strange. It had been very resistant to her from the start. Just now, when she asked the senior for help, she was directly blasted out and rolled down the 9 steps in front of everyone. Now she did not dare to try again. She did not dare to imagine what would happen if the same thing happened a second time. But if she did not do anything, what would she do if the Tianling scepter really did not return? At this moment, it was still quietly floating in front of Chu Luiyue, as if it had become an item that she carried around with her. Jiang Yuqing gently pushed her. You are of royal bloodline after all. No matter what, the Tianling scepter should not do anything to you. You can go and ask for it yourself. Sheng Wanwan suddenly turned around and glared at him. Will not do anything to me? Did he not see the situation just now? She had already embarrassed herself once. If she failed again she would lose all her face. But Jiang Yuqing's attitude was very firm. Aside from Shangguan Wan, who else could take the initiative to help? Elder Chen Ku and the others were in charge of guarding the entire Longquan Palace and controlling the Xian array on the black magnetite. But they had clearly said that the Tianling scepter could not be controlled. Could it be that they were just going to watch? Shangguan Wan gritted her teeth. Unable to persuade Jiang Yuqing, she could only take a step forward. She took a deep breath, looked at the oracle scepter, and tried to make her tone sound sincere. Junior Shangguan Wan respectfully requests the return of the Heaven's Writ scepter. As he spoke, the Tianling scepter remained motionless, as if it had no reaction at all. It had a certain level of intelligence, so naturally, it could understand Shangguan Wan's words. As a result, the situation instantly became even more awkward. The onlookers quieted down with different expressions on their faces. The Heavenly Writ scepter brushed him aside in disdain and ignored his request. After so many years, it seemed that Shangguan Wan was the only one, right? In this awkward silence, even the air seemed to have frozen. Shangguan Wan's face quickly turned red and then turned pale. Her body trembled slightly. He didn't know if it was because he was too angry or because he was too ashamed. In any case, at this moment, Shangguan Wan deeply understood what it meant to be ashamed and unable to show her face. At this moment, Chu Liuyue's clear voice sounded, breaking the dead silence. "Hey, the third princess is inviting you back." Chu Liyue was speaking to the Tianling scepter. Although she also wanted to directly take the Tianling scepter in her hands, it didn't seem appropriate at this moment. The Tianling scepter finally moved after hearing her words. The fluorescent light around it flickered as if it was breathing. Then it actually flew directly to Chu Liyue's side and then struck the ground. But the end of the scepter landed on the white jade stone, making a soft sound. It was actually standing right beside Chu Liyue's leg, just a fist's distance away. As long as Chu Liyue stretched out his hand, he would be able to take it in his hand. Chu Liyue looked down and the corners of his eyes twitched. Was he afraid that the matter wasn't big enough? This seemed to be even more hurtful than her directly snatching it. There was nothing more embarrassing than this. The contrast was so stark and intense that it was impossible to ignore it. On one side, Shangguan Wan was pleading with the Tianling scepter to return, but the Tianling scepter ignored her. On the other side, Chu Liyue was persuading the Tianling scepter to leave, but the Tianling scepter insisted on staying by her side. Everyone could see clearly that the Tianling scepter wanted to stay by Chu Liyue's side. The two ladies faced each other in the hall, and the atmosphere was strange. No one would have thought that something like this would happen during the coronation ceremony. Shangguan Wan stared deadly at Chu Liyue. No. There must be something wrong here. There were so many people present, so why did the Tianling scepter choose Chu Liyue? She wouldn't believe that she didn't have any tricks up her sleeves. Chu Liyue, what do you want? The Tianling scepter is the sacred item of the entire dynasty. Even if you want to play tricks, you should know your limits. How can you think of something like this? Shangguan Wan clenched her fists and reprimanded her. It's fine that you snatched the divine beast back then, but now you won't even let go of the Tianling scepter left behind by the Taizu of the Shangguan family? You're too much. As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned. What did Shangguan Wan say? Snatch the divine beast? What was going on? Could it be that Chu Liyue snatched the divine beast that originally belonged to her? Chu Liyue's expression also calmed down. She looked at Shangguan Wan with a faint smile, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. What do you mean by that, third princess? Why don't I understand? Shangguan Wan sneered. Back then, I went to the Dahuang swamp for Imperial Father. In the Mystic Forest, I happened to meet a demonic beast that was about to break through to the divine beast level. Unfortunately, there was a barrier outside and guards, so I couldn't get close. When I was fighting with that person, you took the opportunity to enter in contract with the demonic beast while it was going through the Tianlai tribulation. Many people have seen this. Do you still want to deny it? You snatched the divine beast, but I didn't pursue the matter because you were willing to use the divine beast's blood to treat Imperial Father. Being able to contract with that divine beast is also your ability. But this time you still want to use tricks to snatch the Tianling scepter. I won't allow it. Everyone was in an uproar. They had long heard that Chu Liyue had returned after contracting with a divine beast, but they didn't know that there were so many twists and turns in this matter. If what Shangguan Wan said was true, then Chu Liyue's actions were indeed not honorable. Seeing that the surrounding people seemed to be gradually siding with her, Shangguan Wan finally felt a little better. She let out a long sigh and said, I know that you come from a lowly background, so it's inevitable that you'll be greedy when you see something good. Whatever you want, I've already tried my best to satisfy you. I even gave up this divine beast to you. But you're still not satisfied. If you want something, you have to do it in an upright manner. Every time you use such despicable thoughts and methods, even if you get it, it won't truly belong to you. And you, how can you be at ease? Sheng Guanwan was certain that Chu Luiyue had used some tricks to make the Tianling scepter go crazy. Therefore, her words were very rude, mocking her both openly and secretly. When the surrounding people heard this, many of them also had doubts in their eyes. That's right. No matter how capable Chu Luiyue was, this Tianling scepter couldn't have gone looking for her for no reason. Could it be that she really did something in secret? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 873. Chu Luiyue listened to her patiently. However, she didn't show any shame or disdain for being exposed. Instead, she smiled. She hadn't even told Sheng Guanwan these words, but the other party had already made the accusation. Her ability to distort the truth was not lost at all. It seems that in the third princess's eyes, I'm really someone who knows everything. Not only can I contract divine beasts as I wish, but I can also use the Tianling scepter as I wish. She spoke coldly, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. Since the third princess thinks so highly of me, wouldn't I be letting down the third princess's good intentions if I don't do anything? Sheng Guanwan was originally quite pleased with herself. She thought that she had the upper hand and would force Chu Luiyue to back down. However, she felt uneasy after hearing what Lin Mingya said. Wasn't Chu Luiyue saying that she was belittling the Tianling scepter? I didn't mean it that way. Elder Qin Ku, there's something I'd like to ask. Chu Luiyue ignored Sheng Guanwan and turned to look at Elder Qin Ku. What? Elder Qin Ku didn't expect Chu Luiyue to suddenly speak to him and was stunned. Chu Luiyue glanced at the Tianling scepter beside her, and her red lips curved up into a deep smile. Just as the third princess said, the Tianling scepter is a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. It's extremely honorable. It's rumored that whoever can pick up the Tianling scepter will successfully inherit the throne. What if I can do it? Elder Qin Ku's eyes widened in shock. Was Chu Luiyue crazy? Did she know what she was saying? Picking up the Tianling scepter, was she planning to openly usurp the throne? Impossible. Before Elder Qin Ku could react, Sheng Guanwan was the first to deny it. Even if you use some method to make the Tianling scepter lose control, you can't pick it up, much less gain its approval. Sheng Guanwan said this with great confidence. This was because the Tianling scepter had been left behind by Taizu. Since ancient times, only those with the Tianling royal bloodline could approach and obtain the Tianling scepter's recognition. What kind of background did Chu Luiyue have to have such thoughts? What wishful thinking. Oh, why don't we make a bet? Chu Luiyue was not annoyed and shrugged. Sheng Guanwan became vigilant. What bet? If I can pick up this scepter and obtain its approval, then, don't even think about it. Sheng Guanwan immediately interrupted her rudely. Chu Luiyue, with your background, do you think you can be related to the Tianling royal family? Don't even think about it. If Chu Luiyue dared to say that she wanted to use this to fight for the throne, she would immediately send people to arrest Chu Luiyue and sentence her to death for the crime of rebellion. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Third princess, why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished. What I want to bet is that if I can do this, then please reinvestigate the death of the crown princess. There was a loud bang. Chu Luiyue's words were like thunder, exploding in everyone's ears. Countless people widened their eyes in shock and looked at her in disbelief. What did Chu Luiyue just say? She wanted to reinvestigate the death of the crown princess? What did that mean? Didn't the crown princess die because she went crazy during her cultivation? Reinvestigate? Could it be that there was something fishy about the death of the crown princess? There were actually many people who had doubts about this matter, but in the past 2 years, they had all stopped investigating because of various reasons. Gradually, no one mentioned this matter anymore. There were even some people who didn't know why, but they kept everything about the crown princess a secret. The woman who was once as dazzling as the sun in the clouds finally fell like a meteor, completely disappearing and returning to silence. Very few people mentioned her again. When Chu Luiyue said that she wanted to bet, many people guessed that she would ask for something. But no matter how much they thought about it, they didn't expect that she was talking about this matter. Sheng Guanwan was also stunned. For a moment, she almost thought that she had heard wrong. What did you say? Chu Luiyue slowly repeated what she had just said. What third princess is unwilling? Do you know what you are saying? Jiang Yuqing finally reacted at this time. His face was covered in frost, and his brows were tightly knitted as he asked coldly. Back then, the crown princess passed away and everything was already concluded. Now you say that you want to reinvestigate. Could it be that you don't trust us? No matter how much he liked Chu Luiyue, he couldn't help it when he heard her say this. Small quarrels were harmless. Even if Chu Luiyue mocked and ridiculed Shang Wanwan, he wouldn't mind too much. However, when it involved the empress concubine, he couldn't show any mercy. Chu Luiyue didn't seem to hear the threat in his words and nodded honestly. That's right, I just don't trust you. Jiang Yuqing suddenly choked. After a while he said, this matter is very important. How can we just let you say whatever you want? Isn't there the Tianling scepter? Chu Luiyue blinked and smiled. Could it be that the extremely noble Tianling scepter can't be exchanged for a chance to reinvestigate the crown princess's death? Chu Luiyue's words were too tricky. No one dared to say, no. The crown princess's status was indeed noble and her reputation was extremely high. But compared to the Tianling scepter, she was still inferior. If she dared to say anything bad about the Tianling scepter, wouldn't she be slandering Taizu? Jiang Yuqing could only change his words. It's not that you can't, but if you insist, you have to at least produce evidence to prove that there was a mistake back then. There is indeed a problem with the crown princess's death. Otherwise, we definitely won't agree to this matter. Back then they did it flawlessly and didn't leave behind any evidence. No matter why Chu Luiyue was suddenly involved in this matter, it was impossible to find any clues, let alone the truth of that year. However, when Chu Luiyue heard this, she nodded in an extremely relaxed manner. All right. As long as you agree to my conditions, I can produce evidence today. I hope that when the time comes, the third princess and prince consort won't go back on their words. Seeing Chu Luiyue's confident appearance, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly thumped and he felt a bit uneasy. Chu Luiyue definitely didn't have nothing better to do to make such a fuss in front of so many people. She was so determined. Could it be that she really, this consort agrees to your conditions? Without waiting for him to refuse, Shang Wanwan had already agreed. If you can pick up the Tianling scepter and obtain its approval, this consort will agree to let you investigate again. However, if you can't do it, then take your own life to atone for your crimes. Respect the Tianling scepter. How about it? Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiyue only wanted to investigate the crown princess's death, but Shang Wanwan was planning to kill Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue lifted her chin slightly and smiled slowly. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade. Alright. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 874. No one had expected things to develop to this stage. Chu Luiyue had actually gambled with her own life in exchange for a chance to investigate the crown princess's death. After a short silence, the crowd broke out into a commotion. Is Chu Luiyue crazy? What is she thinking? She's willing to pay any price to investigate the crown princess's death? Didn't she come from a small place outside Heaven's Canopy? How did she get involved with the crown princess? I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out. In these 2 years there were also people who wanted to do this but they all gave up in the end. Isn't she just finding trouble for herself? What can she do by herself? Aren't you all curious as to why Chu Luiyue dared to make such a claim? Looking at the Tianling scepter's attitude towards her, I think she might be able to do it. Since when was someone without the Tianling royal bloodline able to do such a thing? This was actually the question that everyone was most curious about. No matter how they thought about it, the Tianling scepter shouldn't have anything to do with Chu Luiyue, right? Jiang Yuqing also heard a lot of these whispers. He looked at Chu Luiyue and those familiar eyes, and an extremely absurd thought suddenly appeared in his mind. However, he immediately shook his head forcefully and dismissed the idea. Impossible. Shang Guanyu had already been raped to death back then, and her soul had already dissipated. It was impossible for her to still be alive. At that time he had repeatedly confirmed that there was no mistake. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself, there was still a doubtful voice that didn't dissipate. If Chu Luiyue really had nothing to do with Shang Guanyu, then why would she get involved in this matter? Also, the Tianling scepter didn't care about so many people, even Shang Guanwan, a proper royal princess, but it treated Chu Luiyue differently. He finally could not help but look at Mu Qinghe, who was not far away, only to see that he was also looking at Chu Luiyue with a shocked and confused expression. As the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry, he was personally in charge of the security inside and outside the palace. Lang Kuan Hall was the most important, so he had always been guarding it. Jiang Yuqing frowned. Chu Luiyue was personally brought back by Mu Qinghe. When he first met Chu Luiyue, he was suspicious of her and asked Mu Qinghe to secretly investigate her. The result of the investigation was that there was no problem with Chu Luiyue's identity. She was indeed the abandoned daughter of a declining family that grew up in country Yaoqian. By chance, she changed her fate and finally arrived at West Hill after going through many difficulties. But now, what was going on? Jiang Yuqing was getting more and more nervous. He felt that things were getting out of his control and were heading in an unknown direction. Even he was not sure what would happen in the end. However, at this moment, Jiang Yuqing was not the only one who was shocked. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Luiyue, who was not far away. When he heard her words, he was also shocked. She wants to investigate the death of the princess. Who exactly is she? At this moment, Hong Yao also flew out. Looking at its green wings, it seemed to be a little agitated, and its pair of round eyes stared closely at Chu Luiyue on the other side. It was unknown if it was waiting or hoping for something. A thought suddenly popped up in Mu Qinghe's mind, and his body stiffened. His lips moved slightly as he called Hong Yao back. Hong Yao. Hearing that something was wrong with his voice, Hong Yao finally turned around to take a look. There seemed to be endless undercurrents surging in Mu Qinghe's eyes. Who is she? Everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Luiyue at this point. She lowered her head and glanced at the Tianling scepter. She didn't want to be so ostentatious, but since it gave her so much face, then there was no need to be polite. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue's gaze focused, and she reached out to the dragon head carved at the top. Actually, the Tianling scepter was right beside her, within reach. Therefore, Chu Luiyue only moved her arm, and her fingers were already on the Tianling scepter. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths and were extremely nervous as they stared intently. But the expected resistance and rejection did not happen. The moment Chu Luiyue's hand officially held the Tianling scepter, a buzzing sound rang out. At the same time, the sparkling radiance on it quickly gathered and finally gathered at the eyes of the dragon head. Swoosh! The dragon's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. A golden ray of light shot out from within. It shot straight into the clouds. In an instant, the light shone brightly. It illuminated the world. The sacred light scattered and enveloped Chu Luiyue. The wind whistled and her clothes fluttered. Her black hair fluttered. At a glance, it was incomparably noble. At this moment, Chu Luiyue only felt that the force in her body seemed to have been guided by something, and it quickly surged. It was almost boiling. It was as if something that originally belonged to her had finally returned. It was a perfect fit. Almost instinctively, she held the scepter and raised it high. In the sky, clouds quickly gathered. With the golden light from the Tianling scepter as the center, a huge storm quickly gathered. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was majestic. The next moment, Chu Luiyue waved her wrist lightly. A majestic aura, wrapped in a biting cold murderous intent, rushed straight toward Shangguan. Shangguan was shocked and immediately wanted to retreat. But how could her speed compare to the attack of the Tianling scepter? Boom! That terrifying power flew past her left shoulder, instantly slicing off a large piece of flesh on her shoulder. Ah! Shangguan cried out in shock and flew backward, then fell hard onto the ground. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her back and left shoulder were in pain, and a few of her ribs seemed to have been broken. Her internal organs felt like they were squeezed into a ball, and it was so uncomfortable that it felt like it was going to explode. She struggled to get up, full of resentment. Just as she was about to scold Chu Luiyue, she suddenly heard a cold gasp from the crowd. Shangguan immediately felt that something was wrong. Looking at the crowd, she instantly saw countless pairs of frightened and disgusted eyes. They were looking at her. Shangguan suddenly realized that something was wrong, and only then did she realize that her face was burning with pain. She knew that something was wrong and immediately touched her face. It was rough and sticky to the touch, and it was extremely terrifying. Her mask had actually fallen off. Digression will continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 875. Shangguan's heart was instantly filled with endless panic and fear. She screamed and immediately covered her face with her hands. However, everyone had already seen it clearly while she was in a daze. That originally beautiful face had suddenly become extremely ugly with scars all over it. From afar, it looked like centipedes were covering her face. It was frightening. The surrounding crowd instantly fell into a strange silence. Many people looked at each other in confusion. It was no wonder that the third princess had refused to leave Huayang Palace after returning from Dahuang Swamp. After a long time, more and more people came to see her, and the matters that she had to deal with personally became more and more troublesome. Only then did she begin to see people again. However, under most circumstances she still wouldn't leave the palace. Everyone thought that she had really gotten injured because of His Majesty and needed to rest in bed. However, they didn't know that this was the reason behind it. Her appearance had been completely ruined. Feeling countless gazes on her, Shangguanwan was filled with hatred, anger, and resentment. Even though she had already gotten the divine beast blood from Chu Luiyue and the injuries on her face had started to improve, she hadn't fully recovered yet because she had just applied the medicine. The deep and shallow scars were much better than when her face was constantly festering, but in the eyes of the crowd, they were still extremely terrifying. Shangguanwan trembled all over. She wanted nothing more than to disappear from this place immediately. The surroundings were extremely quiet, but it made her feel extremely tormented. "Your Highness." When Chani, who was standing behind, saw the situation, she was the first to react. She hurriedly rushed forward, wanting to help Shangguanwan up. "Get lost." Shangguanwan pushed Chani away. At this moment, everyone was just laughing at her. She simply struggled to stand up. From the corner of her eye, she saw the tattered mask that had fallen to the ground. However, it was only a thin layer. It was stained with dust and blood and looked extremely dirty. It was as if her face had been torn off and trampled on. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Luiyue. Her eyes were filled with hatred, as if she wanted nothing more than to eat his flesh and drink his blood. "You did it on purpose." Shangguanwan's every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between her teeth, carrying a deep anger and resentment. There were only a few people who knew that her looks had been disfigured. Chu Luiyue had obviously done this to embarrass her in front of everyone. Chu Luiyue looked at her with an apologetic expression. "Third princess, I'm really sorry. My hand slipped just now. Are you all right?" "And slipped? Once?" Shangguanwan was so angry that she almost laughed. She had really underestimated Chu Luiyue. He could even make up such a reason. Chu Luiyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand. There were so many people present, so why did it hit her? Furthermore, he had even removed her mask. If he didn't do it on purpose, Shangguanwan wouldn't believe it even if she was beaten to death. "You bitch." "What?" Just as Shangguanwan was about to scold him, Jiang Yuqing, who was beside her, immediately spoke up and forcefully interrupted her. He walked over with a solemn face. "You're injured. It's better to have your injuries checked first. Leave the rest to me." Shangguanwan was already mad with anger. If she was allowed to continue, who knew what would happen? "Magistrate Zhua," he shouted at Zhua Mingxi. Zhua Mingxi hurried forward. "I'll leave third princess's injuries to you." "Yes." Zhua Mingxi responded and took out a pill. "Your Highness, please take this medicine first." Looking at her, not to mention her external injuries, her internal injuries were also quite serious. "You!" Shangguanwan was about to shake off Jiang Yuqing's hand when she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her body. Her face suddenly paled and cold sweat dripped down with a schwa sound. Jiang Yuqing took the medicine. Take the medicine first." Shangguanwan raised her head with difficulty and glanced at him. There wasn't the slightest bit of heartache in his eyes. There was only coldness and indifference as well as a hint of warning. That was a warning to her not to cause trouble at this time. Shangguanwan's heart suddenly felt sour. Although she already knew that he didn't have any feelings for her, she was injured at this time. Her scars were exposed in front of so many people. She had no face left. He still wasn't moved in the slightest. Ever since she made a scene with him yesterday, he wasn't even willing to act anymore. He wasn't the least bit worried that she would be mocked and ridiculed after today. The despair in Shangguanwan's heart surged like a tide and gradually drowned her. Jiang Yuqing fed her the pill. She opened her mouth mechanically and swallowed it. Then, under Jiang Yuqing's signal, Chani and Zhua Mingxi stepped forward to check her injuries. After taking her pulse, Zhua Mingxi was shocked. There seemed to be two forces crazily fighting inside Shangguanwan's body. If it wasn't resolved quickly, it would be dangerous. "Your Highness, your injuries are more serious. Why don't you go and treat them first?" Zhua Mingxi said carefully. Shangguanwan directly refused. She gritted her teeth and stared at Chu Luiyue. This consort isn't leaving. Today was her wedding day and also the day of her coronation ceremony. She was the main character today. Why should she leave? The coronation ceremony hadn't even started yet. Why should she leave? She wanted to see what kind of waves Chu Luiyue could stir up today. Zhua Mingxi looked at Jiang Yuqing for help. Jiang Yuqing didn't force her. It was fine as long as Shang Wanwan knew how powerful she was. If she really left, the situation today would be even worse. He nodded. Take good care of the third princess. With that, he turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His face no longer had the gentle smile from the beginning of the wedding. Now it was cold and there was even some anger in his eyes. Chu Luiyue, do you know what kind of crime it is to intentionally hurt the third princess? Even he thought that Chu Luiyue's attack just now was intentional. Chu Luiyue sighed softly and glanced at the Tianling scepter in her hand. At this time, the golden pillar of light that pierced through the clouds had gradually dissipated. Only the pair of dragon eyes were still shining with a resplendent light. They were bright, dazzling, and full of power. How could she explain so that they would believe that she really didn't do it on purpose just now, but that the Tianling scepter did it on its own? At that time, it was in the midst of awakening and its aura was erupting. Before she could react, it had already launched that attack at Shang Wanwan. In her opinion, that attack was more like a warning than an attack. Otherwise, Shang Wanwan's injuries wouldn't have stopped there. Thinking of this, she narrowed her eyes and looked at Shang Wanwan. To be honest, it was the Heaven's Writ Scepter that made its move just now, said the Heaven's Writ Scepter. Chapter 876. You're spouting nonsense. When Shang Wanwan heard this, she immediately retorted. Why would the Tianling scepter do this for no reason? I'm of the Tianling royal family's bloodline. Even if someone had tried to pick up the Tianling scepter and failed, they had never heard of the Tianling scepter attacking anyone of its own accord. Chu Luiyue's words were simply too laughable. That's right. With your status, what exactly did you do to provoke the Tianling scepter to do this? Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and asked in return. If I remember correctly, when you tried to pick up the Tianling scepter just now, it seemed to have resisted you a little. Shang Wanwan was about to go on a crusade against Chu Luiyue, but when she heard this, she instantly choked. The rest of her words were stuck in her throat. It was extremely uncomfortable, but she couldn't say it no matter what. She instantly felt guilty and her eyes darted around. Actually, she had also realized this problem. The Tianling scepter had been very rude to her from the start, and it had no intention of submitting to her. Later on, when she asked for help from the senior, it had directly exploded and sent her flying. Could it be because of this? She was in a fit of anger just now, so she didn't care and scolded it. But now, Chu Luiyue's words made her uncertain again. If it was really because of this, she clenched her teeth and braced herself. I don't know what you're talking about. The surrounding people's expressions all became a little strange. Chu Luiyue's words weren't without reason. From the moment Shang Wanwan tried to pick up the Tianling scepter, everything had been going wrong. Something didn't seem right. Even if she couldn't pick it up and didn't receive the Tianling scepter's acknowledgement, she shouldn't have been knocked down from the top and rolled down the 9 steps, right? Could it really be that there was something wrong with Shang Wanwan? Why? Don't try to absolve yourself of the blame. You clearly know this consort's face. Back then, this consort became like this because your demonic beast scratched me. Now that you're treating this consort like this in public, aren't you just trying to embarrass this consort? When Shang Wanwan saw that the situation was not right, she immediately changed the topic. She restrained the anger and resentment on her face and lowered her head to complain tearfully, as if she had been wronged. Chu Luiyue sneered inwardly. She wanted to throw dirty water on her? That would depend on whether or not she was willing to accept it. Third princess, you've misunderstood me. When your face was scratched, I hadn't formed a contract with it yet. I really didn't do it on purpose. As for the trouble Dumpling caused previously, although it had nothing to do with me, I still felt very apologetic. After I came back, I went straight to the palace to offer the blood of the mythological beast to His Majesty and you. If I really wanted to make things difficult for you, why would I do this? Chu Luiyue's tone was light and his expression was sincere. Shang Wanwan was so angry that her chest rose and fell violently. Her eyes widened and her chest rose and fell violently, but she couldn't say a single word. She had clearly taken the initiative to ask for the blood of the mythological beast, so how did it become her offering the treasure in Chu Luiyue's mouth? Lies really came easily from his mouth. However, even though Shang Wanwan was extremely angry, she couldn't refute it. Could it be that she had to admit in public that she had forced Chu Luiyue to take out the blood of the mythological beast? Seeing Shang Wanwan's guilty appearance, many people secretly despised her. Since it was a mistake made before the contract was formed, then this matter naturally had nothing to do with Chu Luiyue. It was already very rare for her to be willing to take the initiative to help, but Shang Wanwan actually made a false accusation. It was obvious what kind of person she was. At this time Jiang Yuqing finally spoke. Even so, it's a fact that you hurt the third princess. You should take responsibility for it. In front of everyone he naturally had to stand on Sheng Wanwan's side. Moreover, he wasn't sure of Chu Liyue's identity and didn't know what she was planning to do. Naturally he was extremely vigilant. Chu Liyue glanced at the Tianling scepter. She really knew how to cause more trouble than she did. The Tianling scepter trembled imperceptibly. After this matter, I will naturally do what I have to do. But now the winner of this bet can be decided, right? As Chu Liyue spoke, she raised her arm and flipped her wrist. Swoosh. She held the Tianling scepter tightly in her hand and pointed the dragon's head directly at Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing's heart trembled. He didn't know why, but when he met those golden dragon eyes, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. It was as if everything about him had been seen through. He instinctively looked away and frowned. I have already picked up the Tianling scepter and obtained its approval. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. Her red lips parted slightly, but her eyes were cold. Can we start investigating the crown princess's death again? There was silence in front of the huge Langkuan palace. Chu Liyue held the Tianling scepter in her hand, and her dragon eyes shone brightly. Everyone understood that Chu Liyue had indeed won this bet. When they heard her mention investigating the crown princess's death again, many people had complicated expressions. Who would have thought that this grand and solemn ceremony would end up like this? Almost everyone looked at Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing. In front of everyone they couldn't break the contract on the spot. This time they had to investigate. Jiang Yuqing stared intently at Chu Liyue. After a long while he said, "All right. Since you have done it, then the third princess and I will naturally accept our loss." The crowd instantly became chaotic. This meant that he agreed. They really had to investigate the crown princess's death again. 2 years ago, everything happened too quickly, and there were indeed many suspicious points. But now they were finally going to investigate thoroughly? Do you think that there really was something fishy about the crown princess's death back then? The Tianling scepter felt that the crown princess had been wronged, so it allowed Chu Liyue to succeed in exchange for this opportunity? It can't be. Wasn't it already decided at that time? Even the crown princess's trusted aides didn't make much of a fuss. If there really was a problem, would they let it go? Why not? The crown princess's trusted aides are now either dead or injured, especially the 13 Yu guards. They are still being hunted down and there are very few of them left. If you really want to say something, it can only be Mu Qinghe. I think so too. If not, there's really no way to explain how Chu Liyue picked up the Tianling scepter. She's so persistent. Could it be that she was also one of the crown princess's people back then? Everyone discussed in low voices and all kinds of guesses appeared. Jiang Yuqing heard most of it and his heart was in a mess. He looked at Chu Liyue and said in a low voice, "Put the Tianling scepter back into the black mystic stone first, and everything else can be discussed." After all, it was the sacred artifact of the Tianling dynasty. How could it be in Chu Liyue's hands like this? Especially when there was a battered and exhausted Sheng Wanwan beside him. The comparison was tragic. It was like a joke. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Okay. Then she flicked her wrist. The Tianling scepter quickly flew out. However, not long after it flew out, the Tianling scepter suddenly changed direction and flew back, standing in front of Chu Liyue again. The dragon head lightly tapped on the back of Chu Liyue's hand, then shook and jumped as if it was asking for credit. Hee, I'm back. Did you miss me? The corner of Chu Liyue's mouth twitched. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 877. How should she put it? In her previous life, she did not have the chance to wait until the day of her wedding. Naturally, she did not get to see the Tianling scepter. In Chu Liyue's heart, the Tianling scepter had always been a very dignified and sacred existence. It was high up and could not be blasphemed. So today, when the Tianling scepter flew towards her, she was both surprised and happy. With the Tianling scepter in her hand, it seemed to make up for all the regrets she had in the past. But no one had ever told her that the Tianling scepter was so clingy. Looking at the Tianling scepter in front of her, which was so happy that it was waiting to be praised, even someone as strong as Chu Liyue felt that she could not take it for a moment. If you are happy, why don't you consider me? There are so many people watching. Under normal circumstances, Chu Liyue did not really care about other people's gazes. Only at this moment did he feel as though he was burning. Cough. Chu Liyue clenched her fist and coughed. Then she stretched out her hand and pushed it. Well, I think you should go back. The Tianling scepter did not seem to hear her and continued to swing its head around. It did not seem to have any intention of going back. Swoosh. Something flashed in front of Chu Liyue's eyes. Tuanzi suddenly flew out and faced the Tianling scepter as it widened its round eyes. I told you to go back. Why are you still here? The Tianling scepter paused and swayed in another position, circling around Chu Liyue's hand. Why do you care? It is not a divine beast. Why are you jealous of it? Dumpling was confused. Chu Liyue was speechless. One was a divine beast and the other was a sacred object. Either one of them would be envied. But why did she feel an inexplicable sense of embarrassment? Seeing that they were going to continue arguing, Chu Liyue made a prompt decision. She grabbed Dumpling's wings and put it on her shoulder. However, as soon as he let go, Dumpling struggled and rushed out again. The Tianling scepter also jumped back and forth as if it was provoking him. Chu Liyue held his forehead helplessly. Finally, he couldn't help but shout, "Don't make a fuss." It was finally quiet. The Tianling scepter obediently stood to the side, and Dumpling once again nestled on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Chu Liyue heaved a long sigh of relief and looked at Jiang Yuqing. Well, I've already tried my best. I really can't do anything about this kind of thing. Jiang Yuqing's expression was very strange. It couldn't be helped. No one would be able to remain calm after witnessing such a scene. However, Jiang Yuqing was someone who had seen a lot. He quickly calmed down. Seeing that the Tianling scepter was really sticking to Chu Liyue and refusing to leave, Shangguan would only lose more face if they continued to dwell on this issue. The best way was to ignore it for now. Therefore, Jiang Yuqing directly changed the topic. Let's not talk about this matter for now. As for what you said just now, we will send a small team to investigate again. No need. Chu Liyue chuckled and interrupted Jiang Yuqing. That would be too troublesome. Let's just start here. Well, what? Jiang Yuqing was also stunned for a moment. For a moment he didn't know what Chu Liyue meant. Even Shangguan could not help but open her mouth again and scold him coldly. Start here? How can that be? Chu Liyue, get it straight. This is Longquan Palace. How can you be so presumptuous here? Not only did you rely on the Tianling scepter to steal the limelight, you actually want to start investigating Shangguan Yu's death here? You're thinking too much. Jiang Yuqing also frowned. After all, today is the day of my wedding with the third princess. Even if Jiang Yuqing didn't care much about Shangguan, he still attached great importance to this wedding. Shangguan side had already caused enough trouble. If Shangguan Yu's death was also brought up, it would really be a mess. Upon hearing Jiang Yuqing's words, Shangguan face also carried a hint of resentment. Chu Liyue, you insist on doing this. Could it be that you don't want to see this consort happy? On this consort's wedding day, you deliberately brought up this consort. Are you sincerely cursing this consort? Chu Liyue widened his eyes in confusion. Third princess, where did this come from? Didn't you always say that the crown princess is the elder sister that you respect the most? Why do you feel that mentioning her today is a curse to you? Shangguan immediately choked and was speechless. Chu Liyue chuckled. Her Highness the crown princess has always doted on you. If she knew that you were getting married to the prince consort today, I'm sure that she would be happy for you. Don't you think so? Shangguan suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It went straight to the top of her head. Enough. She rudely interrupted Chu Liyue's words. Just do whatever you want to do. At that time, Shangguan Yu was already dead, and all the evidence and clues were basically destroyed. There was no way to investigate at all. She didn't believe that these people would be able to find anything 2 years later. Jiang Yuqing subconsciously wanted to stop her, but Shangguan had already spoken. He slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. For some reason he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. Many thanks for third princess's understanding. Chu Liyue smiled in response, then took a step forward. Everyone looked over with different expressions on their faces. Chu Liyue looked straight at Jiang Yuqing. The smile on her face gradually faded, and there seemed to be a cold glint in her eyes. Back then, the crown princess's funeral was jointly managed by the third princess and the prince consort. Then, the two of you are the ones who know the most about everything, right? Jiang Yuqing didn't know what she was going to do, but he still nodded. That's right. At that time he was still a low-level fiancé, and Shangguan was the only one who was slightly older among the heirs of the imperial family. Naturally, the two of them were in charge. Everyone was aware of this. That's good. I have a few questions that I want to ask the two of you first. Chu Liyue raised a finger. First, when something happened to the crown princess, It was you who discovered it first, right? Yes. Jiang Yuqing answered without hesitation. These questions had already been asked by countless people. He, Sheng Wanwan, and the others had already made up a set of excuses. Even if Chu Liwei asked him 100 times in public, he would still say the same thing. That day the crown princess said that she wanted to cultivate and try to break through to the 9th stage, so she chose to go into seclusion. But not long after, I noticed that something was wrong. When I barged in, I found that the crown princess was already dying. Jiang Yuqing spoke very smoothly and calmly, as if the scene that day was really like that. Chu Liwei raised a second finger. All right. Second question. Why didn't the crown princess cultivate earlier or later? Why did she have to try to break through to the 9th stage on such an important day before the wedding? All cultivators know that breaking through is risky, and the higher the level, the longer it takes to break through. Could it be that she doesn't want to participate in the wedding the next day? Chapter 878. Jiang Yuqing was still able to respond easily. No one knew what the empress concubine was thinking. But everyone knew that apart from the wedding, the next day was also her ascension ceremony. Perhaps she did this to pick up the Tianling scepter and stand on it in a better posture. Moreover, she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Breaking through to rank 9 might be unattainable for ordinary cultivators. But for her it might be much easier. These words were not without reason. Not long after the empress concubine was born, she was tested to have a Tianjing Yuan meridian. Since then she had been the top genius of the entire Tianling dynasty. Whether it was martial cultivation, Shen master, or celestial physician, she was extremely talented. It wasn't strange for her to have such thoughts. Chu Liwei nodded thoughtfully and then asked, "Why are you here?" In that case, why didn't the empress concubine go to the ancestral hall if she planned to focus on breaking through? I remember that the ancestral hall of the Tianling royal family was also destroyed because of this, right? As the heir to the Tianling throne, what's wrong with going to the ancestral hall? Jiang Yuqing asked. Of course there's nothing wrong with it. According to this, the empress concubine was in the ancestral hall the entire day before yesterday? And eldest young master Jiang, you were guarding outside the entire time? Of course. The people who served her that day can testify to this. Jiang Yuqing had already answered these questions countless times, so he was completely at ease. His brows gradually furrowed as he looked at Chu Liwei and said coldly, "If the reinvestigation you're talking about is asking these questions again in front of everyone, then let me tell you, this is meaningless. If you really have doubts about what happened back then, you have to produce evidence. Otherwise there's no need to continue. I haven't finished asking yet." Chu Liwei smiled and suddenly looked at Yuqi Song. "Master, you should also have some questions to ask eldest young Master Jiang, right?" Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Weiqi Song. Weiqi Song nodded, looked at Jiang Yuqing and said in a deep voice, "Previously this old man had made a trip to Thousand View Gardens' zither room to retrieve some of the items I had left there. However, there was something wrong with Empress Concubine's Phoenix Tail zither." Hearing the words Phoenix Tail zither, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly sank. Everyone knows that the Empress Concubine loved that zither very much when she was alive. However, this old man discovered that the Empress Concubine had left a Xian formation on it. Weiqi Song stared intently at Jiang Yuqing and enunciated every word clearly. "Although this old man isn't a top-notch mystic cultivator, I have dabbled in this aspect. The Xian formation that the Empress Concubine had engraved on the zither was only a level 3 Xian formation. But the important thing was that the name of the Xian formation was Dragon Trapping Formation. If there really isn't any problem, then why did Princess leave such a profound formation on the zither that she likes so much? In this old man's opinion, the level and power of that Xian formation are not worth mentioning, but the name of that Xian formation is very meaningful. Dragon Trapping Formation. When a dragon is trapped, it seeks help from the outside. The Empress Concubine had clearly encountered danger, so she left this Xian formation, hinting that she had been harmed by a traitor. Once this was said, everyone was shocked. If what Yuqi Song said was true, then there really was a big problem with this matter. One had to know that the Empress Concubine had outstanding talent in this aspect since she was young. It was absolutely impossible for her to leave a mere level 3 Xian formation on such a precious item. Yuqi Song's explanation was the only reasonable answer. Jiang Yuqing was greatly alarmed and clenched his fists tightly. He had been careless. He had been in charge of the zither room for 2 years, but he had never discovered that there was such a hint on the zither. At that time it was in the zither room. After Shang Guanyu finished playing a song, he brought the last cup of tea to Shang Guanyu, luring her poison to act up. After that, she quickly realized that something was wrong and wanted to resist. But at that time she was already no match for Jiang Yuqing. In the end, he secretly brought her back to the palace and locked her in the imperial family's ancestral hall. At that time, he had always thought that everything had progressed smoothly. But now that he thought about it, she had indeed struggled and stayed by the zither for quite a long time. Could it be that the Shin formation was left behind at that time? Jiang Yuqing tried his best to calm himself down and said with a cold expression, "Pavilion Master Yuqi, you have to pay attention to evidence when you speak. The evidence is on the phoenix tail zither." Yuqi Song immediately said, "You have always been in charge of the zither room. As long as you send someone to retrieve the phoenix tail zither, we will know at a glance." When everyone heard this, they felt that it was very reasonable and all looked at Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing pursed his lips. At this moment, he finally understood that the secret Yuqi Song had discovered in the zither room that day was actually this. No wonder his attitude changed so much after that. It turned out that he was already certain that someone had harmed Shang Guanyu. As one of the closest people to Shang Guanyu and the one who accompanied Shanghai Yu to the zither room the most, his suspicions were naturally the greatest. The phoenix tail zither was lost some time ago. Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath and said. At this moment, he was incomparably glad that the zither was gone. Otherwise, if the evidence was verified and it was as Wei Qi Song had said, there was no way he could clear his name. Everyone was in an uproar. Lost. How could such an important thing be lost? Hasn't Jiang Yuqing always been in charge of the zither room? How could it be lost for no reason? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Low voices of doubt could be heard from the crowd. Jiang Yuqing was also somewhat embarrassed. But at this moment this was undoubtedly the best excuse. It was my incompetence that led to the loss of the phoenix tail zither. I've been sending people to secretly search for it, but there hasn't been any progress. I'm afraid that this lead will be cut off for the time being. Jiang Yuqing looked a little ashamed, but his eyes were very resolute. Without the zither, there's no way to prove whether what Pavilion Master Yuqi said was true or false. Pavilion Master Yuqi, it's not that I don't trust you, but this is a serious matter. Without concrete evidence, I don't dare to say anything. Yuqi Song asked in return. In other words, you'll only admit to my words if we find the phoenix tail zither? Jiang Yuqing paused. Yes. Without the phoenix tail zither, everything that happened today would not have been able to continue. Everything would have been empty talk. Many people looked disappointed. They thought that they had finally found some clues, but they didn't expect it to be gone just like that. If the crown princess was really harmed, then the longer this dragged on, the harder it would be to find out the truth. At this moment, Yuqi Song suddenly said, "What a coincidence! What a coincidence! Yesterday someone delivered a gift to this old man." Jiang Yuqing suddenly looked up. Then he saw Yuqi Song wave his sleeve, and a zither appeared in front of him. It was the phoenix tail zither. It's just right here. Why don't we take a look at it ourselves? Digression. The 5th chapter is about to be updated. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 879. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face finally cracked, and he cried out in shock. Why is this thing with you? Could it be that the person who secretly broke into the zither room and stole this phoenix tail zither was Yuqi Song? That person's aura was hidden extremely well. He had never thought that it would be related to Yuqi Song. Didn't this old man say just now? This is a big gift sent by someone yesterday. Yuqi Song stroked his beard and showed the phoenix tail zither to everyone. Everyone can take a look and see if this is the zither that the Empress concubine had back then. Everyone looked at each other and fell silent for a moment. Eldest young Master Jiang should be the most familiar with this thing. Why don't you check it out? Otherwise, someone will say that this old man took a fake thing and created a rumor out of thin air here. As Yuqi Song spoke, he even pushed it forward. Jiang Yuqing was standing 10 steps away. With his eyesight, from the moment he saw this thing, he had already confirmed that this was indeed the one that was lost in the zither room. However, he really couldn't figure out why this thing would be with Yuqi Song. He said that someone sent it yesterday. Who was that person? Let me take a look. In the quiet and strange atmosphere, a person walked out. It was Yuan Wei. He walked over with a smile. Back then, Her Highness the Empress concubine liked this zither very much and specially asked me to prepare many matching items. Therefore, I am quite familiar with this thing. I will identify it. Everyone should trust me, right? Yuqi Song handed the item over. Please. Although Yuan Wei's position wasn't comparable to the 3 dukes, His status was also very noble because his family had been passed down for thousands of years. His words carried a lot of weight. Yuan Wei carefully took the phoenix tail zither and looked around carefully. His expression gradually became serious. After a moment he nodded. This is indeed the Empress Concubine's item. Moreover, there is indeed a dragon trapping array inside this zither. Let me take a look too. Jian Shai finally couldn't help but come over and take a look. There seemed to be a glimmer of light flickering on the phoenix-tailed zither. Flipping it over, one could see that there was indeed a palm-sized Shen formation at the bottom, and it was shining brightly. Jiang Yuqing's mind was in chaos. Back then he had only been focused on dealing with the Shangguan Yu and hadn't paid much attention to the phoenix-tail zither. In the past 2 years he had rubbed the rosin on the phoenix-tail zither countless times, but he had never noticed this. Thinking of this he immediately said, "This Shen formation didn't exist before. I've never seen a Shen formation like this before. It was only a level 3 Shen formation, and any Shen master could carve it on it." Pavilion Master Yuqi, even if you suspect that there's a problem with the princess's death, there's no need to use such methods to deceive everyone, right? Wei Qisong laughed coldly when he heard this. Of course you didn't see it before because there was a seal on the Shen formation. It was only after this old man broke the seal that this profound formation was revealed. Jiang Yuqing froze on the spot. What seal? He actually knew nothing about this. This is indeed the dragon trapping array. And this aura is indeed from the princess's hands. Jian Shai nodded affirmatively. Because the material of this phoenix tail zither is extremely precious and special, ordinary people can't leave any traces on it. Although this Shen formation is only a level 3 Shen formation, the person who can do this is definitely a top-notch Shen master. If I'm not wrong, the princess should have used the power of her Tianjing Yuan meridian to seal this Shen formation and conceal its aura. Yu Qisong stroked his beard. That's right. This old man only saw this dragon trapping array after breaking the seal. Shangguan Yu's strength had already reached level 8 Shen master back then. If she wanted to hide something, it definitely wouldn't be a difficult matter. Jiang Yuqing's heart kept sinking, and his entire body turned ice cold. He had overlooked it. He had truly overlooked it. He had actually forgotten that he wasn't Shangguan Yu's opponent at all, which was why he couldn't even see through her methods. And now, all of this had become conclusive evidence. After that, a few more people came forward to take a look. They all nodded and confirmed that this was indeed left behind by the princess back then. Because she had a Tianjing Yuan meridian, her aura was very easy to recognize. Anyone with some status in the Tianling dynasty would be able to confirm it with just one look. What's this? As Jian Shai spoke, he suddenly saw that there seemed to be something under the Shen formation. He moved closer and his expression changed slightly. There's a word of blood on it. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. If nothing really happened, why would there be a word of blood on the phoenix tail zither? Moreover, she used such complicated methods to conceal it. Jiang Yuqing's heart thumped violently. It almost jumped out of his chest. All the blood in his body seemed to freeze at this moment. No. Everything happened very quickly back then. Shangguan Yu couldn't possibly have the time and energy to do all this. Jiang Yuqing kept admonishing himself, but there was still a voice in the depths of his heart that kept ringing. Why not? She was smart and quick-witted. Was there anything she couldn't do? This word of blood was also left behind by the princess. Jian Shai's expression had completely turned cold. Yuan Wei and the others who were standing nearby also had a change in expression. Naturally, they recognized him as well. What's the word of blood on it? Someone couldn't wait to ask. Yu Qisong laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. Jiang Yuqing, you should know what the word of blood on it says, right? Jiang Yuqing's temples throbbed. I don't, Jiang. Jian Shai suddenly raised the phoenix tail zither and shouted sternly. The word of Jiang is on it. Jiang Yuqing, isn't this your Jiang? Digression, Tianling scepter, I heard that someone said that I'm a clown? February, yes. They're all talking about you. Tianling scepter, angry. February, yes. So I won't add more chapters for them. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 880. His voice was like thunder as it fell heavily. In an instant, everyone was shocked on the spot. The bloody words hidden on the phoenix tail guqin were actually Jiang? Anyone with a brain could guess that the Empress concubine had used such a complicated method to leave this secret signal on the phoenix tail guqin. There was definitely a hidden meaning. Dragon trapping array bloody words Jiang, isn't this implying that Jiang Yuqing is the one who harmed me? There was dead silence in front of Lang Kuan Hall. Jiang Yuqing's ears were ringing. Jian Shai's stern questioning was like a heavy punch, catching him off guard and completely stupefied on the spot. He thought that everything back then was flawless and that no one would be able to find any clues. But he never expected that Shang Guanyu had actually left a trick up her sleeve. There was actually such a shocking secret hidden on the phoenix tail Guqin. Everyone's gazes converged on him. Suspicion, shock, anger, all kinds of gazes enveloped Jiang Yuqing like flames. Even his entire body felt like it was burning up. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. Jiang Yuqing had never been as embarrassed as he was now. He tried his best to calm himself down and tried to make his voice sound calm. The word Jiang doesn't mean anything. Not to mention the Tianling dynasty, there are countless people with the surname Jiang in Xiling City alone. Why are you so sure that it's me at first glance? What if this word doesn't refer to my surname, but something else? Jian Shai was so angry that he laughed. Jiang Yuqing, don't play dumb here. There are many people with the surname Jiang, but I'm afraid there aren't many who can be remembered by the Empress concubine, right? If she wasn't forced into a desperate situation, the Empress concubine definitely wouldn't have left such a hint. In other words, it's very likely that something happened to her in the zither room. And you, aren't you the one who usually accompanies her in the zither room? Do you really not know anything about this? Jiang Yuqing's eyes flickered. Mountain Lord Jian's words aren't without reason. But this matter indeed has nothing to do with me. Back then, the Empress concubine and I were in love, and we were about to get married. What reason do I have to harm her? You'll have to ask yourself. Wei Qi Song suddenly interjected, his voice flat and indifferent. Didn't you also get together with the third princess in less than 2 years after the Empress concubine left? You even got married? Well said. As soon as Yu Qi Song finished speaking, another powerful voice came from the other side. It was none other than Meng Jingji, who had been extremely dissatisfied with this marriage from the very beginning. Even if I don't ask you to be the Empress concubine and never marry again, you should at least show some sincerity, right? In the end, right after you finished the princess funeral, you were together with the third princess. You still have the face to say that you were in love? Hey, if this was the Western frontier, someone like you wouldn't be considered a man. Even women wouldn't take a fancy to you. Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan were together. Their relationship was fake, but their identity was real. If Shang Guanwan didn't have such a status, why would Jiang Yuqing even spare her a glance? Although Meng Jingji was stationed at the Western frontier all year round and didn't return to the Western Tomb often, this didn't mean that he knew nothing about the Western Tomb. He was a military general, but he also had good eyesight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sit in this position for dozens of years. Back then, even Mu Qinghe couldn't replace him when she led troops to quell the rebellion in the Great Desolate Swamp. This person's ability could be seen at a glance. Jiang Yuqing's face instantly darkened. Shang Guanwan was still shocked and worried about the phoenix tail zither, but in the next moment she heard that she was also being scolded. She was so angry that her face turned white. But when she glanced at Meng Jingji, she forcefully swallowed back those unpleasant words. This person was a tough nut to crack. Today's troubles were already enough. If she provoked Meng Jingji, it would be like adding oil to the fire. Jiang Yuqing remained unmoved. He only said indifferently, "My marriage with Waner has nothing to do with this. Even if there's really something fishy about the princess's death, everyone shouldn't be able to pin the crime on me just based on the word blood, right?" He planned to insist on this point. It's true that the word Jiang was written on it, and it's also true that he was one of the closest people to the princess back then. Anyone who saw this would inevitably make the connection. But as long as they couldn't produce any other evidence, he still had some leeway. That's right. You have no evidence. My Jiang family won't let you off just because you're slandering Yuqing. We'll be at your mercy. Jiang Lizhua stood out and hollered in a low voice. This old man wants to see who it is that wants to drag my Jiang family down with him. How dare you pour this basin of dirty water on my son? Jiang Lizhua was a grand tutor after all, and his status was very high. In addition, Jiang Yuqing was now married to the third princess, so the entire Jiang family's status had risen by another level. Ordinary people really couldn't afford to offend the Jiang family. However, Yu Qi Song suddenly laughed. Everyone will eventually find out who this basin of dirty water belongs to. Since you want evidence, I'll give it to you. Jiang Yuqing's brows twitched harshly. Seeing Yu Qi Song's confident look, does he really have any evidence? Yu Qi Song stared at him and slowly said, I watched the princess grow up with me. I'm indebted to the princess's love for me, and she treats me as half a master. Ever since the princess's death, my Chongshu pavilion has also suffered continuous attacks. The pavilion's elders and disciples have all been beaten up, and there aren't many people left. It's almost impossible for the mountain gate to hold on. The reason for all of this is actually just that I want to investigate the princess's death. Yuchi Song's expression gradually turned solemn and cold, and even the surrounding space seemed to freeze along with it. It's not just my Chongshu pavilion. In the past 2 years, there have been many people who want to investigate the truth behind the princess's death. However, these people have either died or been injured, and some have even quietly disappeared, never to appear again. It's as if someone is deliberately obstructing them by hook or by crook. Everyone should be aware of this. In this world, the one who doesn't want the truth of that matter to be exposed the most is most likely the person who harmed the princess. A few people inwardly nodded. Although no one had said this on the surface, everyone knew in their hearts. Jiang Lizuo was so angry that he laughed. What, Yuchi Song, do you mean that the one who secretly killed your Chongshu pavilion is my son? Jiang Yuqing also frowned. Pavilion Master Yuchi, I've already personally sent Qi Dai to you. It's true that he used Chaos Yuan gravel on the Chongshu pavilion, but I truly didn't know about this matter before. Whether it's true or not, let him come over and we'll know when we confront him. Yuchi Song said indifferently. Jiang Yuqing felt that this was extremely absurd and couldn't help but say, you know that Qi Dai is already delirious, so how can you confront him? Oh, you're talking about this. Yuchi Song suddenly laughed. This old man has already cured him. A better reading experience came from the Love Network. Chapter 881. Qi Dai, you say it yourself. Yuchi Song ignored the shock on Jiang Yuqing and the others' faces and suddenly turned around to wave at someone. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He had been standing behind Yuchi Song and the others, so everyone subconsciously thought that he was a disciple of the Chongshu Pavilion and didn't pay him any attention. After hearing Yuchi Song's words, he walked forward and rubbed his lower jaw for a while before taking off a thin mask. Under the mask, the person's cheeks were thin and his face was haggard, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His left ear was gone and there was only a scar the size of a bowl. It was a ghastly sight. It was Qi Dai. Jiang Yuqing looked at Qi Dai, who should have died in the Chongshu Pavilion, and his hands were already tightly clenched in his sleeves. He didn't die. He actually didn't die. Most importantly, the pair of muddy eyes had actually regained their clarity at this moment. Apart from looking a little weak, he was no different from an ordinary person. Qi Dai raised his head to look at Jiang Yuqing, and his emotions suddenly became intense. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. His entire body trembled, and he wanted nothing more than to immediately charge forward and chop Jiang Yuqing into 8 pieces. However, his chest was surging with anger and he couldn't say a single word. He could only let out a hoarse whimper that was difficult to understand. His throat has been drugged and he can't speak anymore. Yuchi Song looked indifferently at Jiang Yuqing. I wonder what the person who drugged him was worried that he would say. Yuan Wei glanced at the situation, and his eyes moved slightly. Pavilion Master Yuchi, this Qi Dai it's a long story. Then Yuchi Song gave a simple account of finding the messed yuan gravel and finding the person who had secretly tried to kill them. Messed yuan gravel can only be found in Nanjiang, and not many people in the entire Tianling dynasty have been to Nanjiang. Coincidentally, eldest young Master Jiang brought people there not long after the empress concubine's death. This old man then asked him to help investigate. After a long time he sent Qi Dai over saying that he was the one who did it. At that time Qi Dai had been tortured and beaten. He was unconscious and could not answer any questions. Even if this old man wanted to ask more, it would be impossible. Jiang Yuqing said coldly. Pavilion Master Weiqi, are you doubting me? Qi Dai's body has traces of the mixed yuan gravel's backlash. You clearly saw it that day. Why are you not going to admit it now? Weiqi Song, however, merely smiled. Qi Dai, raise your arm for everyone to see. Qi Dai did as he was told and rolled up his sleeves, revealing his forearms. On the inside of his forearm, there was a red line that extended from his palm upwards. Is this the evidence of the messed yuan gravel's backlash? Jian Shai was shocked when he saw it. He immediately moved closer to take a closer look. There were very few people in the entire Tianling dynasty who could recognize this. Otherwise, Yuchi Song and the others would not have taken so long to figure out this matter. That's right. This is indeed the evidence of the messed yuan gravel in his body, but the backlash. Jiang Yuqing heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Since Pavilion Master Wei Qi also said so, then where did this suspicion come from? Yuqi Song pointed at Qi Dai. Naturally, it's because the messed yuan gravel in Qi Dai's body backfired much later than when we discovered the messed yuan gravel. To be honest, the matter of the messed yuan gravel was discovered on the day Lu Yu and Wanzhou officially entered my Chongshu pavilion. Wanzhou grew up in Nanjiang, so it was him who recognized this thing. In the following 2 days, we thought of a way to clean up all the messed yuan gravel on Qingyuan Mountain. Logically speaking, the person who did this should have suffered the backlash at that time. However, all the injuries on Qi Dai's body were added within this month. With every sentence Yuqi Song said, Jiang Yuqing's heart sank an inch. Apart from me, there are also many celestial physicians with superb strength present. If you don't believe me, you can come forward and check for yourself. Qi Dai's injuries clearly appeared after I went to ask Jiang Yuqing for help. As soon as Yuqi Song finished speaking, everyone quieted down and looked at Jiang Yuqing strangely. At this point, even a fool could tell that there was a problem. If Jiang Yuqing didn't do this because he had a guilty conscience, then why? Qi Dai, who caused the injuries on your body? Yuqi Song asked. Qi Dai pointed at Jiang Yuqing angrily and let out a hoarse cry of despair. Just take it that he did it for interrogation, so let's not talk about it for now. Then, who planted the messed yuan gravel in your body? Qi Dai still pointed at Jiang Yuqing, his finger trembling slightly because of resentment and anger. Jiang Yuqing stared at him. Qi Dai, you and I are master and servant. I've never done anything to let you down. Why are you slandering me like this? Whether it's slander or not, everyone can see it clearly. I heard that you gathered all the subordinates who had gone to Nanjiang together and interrogated them one by one. After that, most of them went back. Only Qi Dai went missing. The next time he appeared, it was you who sent him to my Chongshu pavilion. Wasn't it easy to do something during such a long time? Thinking about it, he should have been poisoned by the messed yuan gravel at that time. Yuqi Song said slowly, but every word was like a heavy stone that smashed fiercely into Jiang Yuqing's heart. Do you have any explanation for all this? Everyone looked at Jiang Yuqing, waiting for his answer. In fact, even if he didn't say anything, everyone already had their own guesses in their hearts. What Yuqi Song said couldn't be faked. It was almost certainly true. Then, there was indeed something wrong with Jiang Yuqing. Faced with everyone's burning gazes, Jiang Yuqing took a deep breath and said coldly, Qi Dai followed me through life and death. Why should I treat him like this? At that time, Pavilion Master Yuqi took the initiative to ask me for help. That's why I did this. In the end, you're saying that I lied to you? What good would that do for me? Fabricating a fake was naturally to cover up the real one. Yuqi Song's lips twitched without a smile. His gaze was sharp and cold, like a sharp sword that wanted to tear off Jiang Yuqing's hypocritical mask. If eldest young Master Jiang doesn't mind, can you show your arm for everyone to see? There's a question that this old man has been wanting to ask you for a long time. Your arm was injured not earlier or later, but on the day we cleaned up the messed yuan gravel and caused the person who secretly poisoned you to suffer a backlash? Jiang Yuqing, can you answer these questions one by one? Asked Jiang Yuqing. A better reading experience came from Love Network. Chapter 882. Yuqi Song pressed on, his series of questions almost suffocating Jiang Yuqing. He originally thought that Qi Dai would die soon after arriving at Chongshu Pavilion. Even if he didn't die, the people at Chongshu Pavilion would kill him out of hatred. Even if Yuqi Song and the others had doubts, they wouldn't be able to stir up any more waves. This matter would be closed. But he never expected that not only did Yuqi Song and the others fail to kill Qi Dai, they even tried their best to save him. No matter how he thought about it, he actually left himself a huge problem. Jiang Yuqing was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have made such an unnecessary move. Even if Yuqi Song and the others kept suspecting him, they wouldn't be able to find any evidence. It would be a waste of effort. If he had thought more at that time, he wouldn't have fallen into such a trap. Now, the timing of Qi Dai's backlash from the Chaos Yuan gravel didn't match up. Instead, it became the best evidence for them to refute him. Jiang Yuqing understood that if he couldn't give a reasonable explanation for this matter, then from now on, he would have to bear this stigma. Pavilion Master Wei Qi, I really don't know what's going on. Qi Dai used to be my subordinate, but after returning from Nanjiang, I dismissed them all. If it weren't for helping you this time, I wouldn't have gone to look for them at all. For such a long time, no one knows what they've been doing or who they've been following. Maybe they've already changed masters and are targeting me. Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth and only said that he had nothing to do with this matter. There's one thing that many people might still remember. Previously, I was ambushed in my residence and was injured. Because of this, I sent people to track down that person's whereabouts. And the person I was looking for at that time was actually Qi Dai's good friend. To be honest, that person's name is Xiaomu. He and Qi Dai are good brothers who have gone through fire and water together. After being dismissed, the two of them didn't have any other relatives, so they became neighbors. They took care of each other and had a very good relationship. Since Xiaomu was able to assassinate me, who knows if Qi Dai did not have the same goal. Although Jiang Yuqing's explanation was somewhat weak, it was not completely unconvincing. After all, the news of him being assassinated in the Jiang mansion had spread like wildfire among the aristocratic families. To say that he was putting on a show was a bit too much. During this period of time, Qi Dai has indeed been detained by me. However, in the beginning, I only detained him because I wanted to investigate Xiaomu. Who would have thought that he would later discover that he had actually suffered a backlash from the Chaos Yuan gravel? I thought that he was the person Pavilion Master Wei Qi was looking for. After interrogating him, I sent him away. As for the rest, I really don't know. Jiang Yuqing cupped his hands at Yuqi Song. Speaking of which, I was negligent in this matter. I hope Pavilion Master Wei Qi won't blame me. But these things really have nothing to do with me. Back then, experts were as numerous as clouds in the Chongshu Pavilion. How could I have the ability to kill most of the cultivators in the Chongshu Pavilion in a single night? Pavilion Master Wei Qi, you think too highly of me. Hearing Jiang Yuqing's words, everyone's expressions were different. Many people's eyes were wavering. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but sneer as she listened from the side. Jiang Yuqing's mouth was as eloquent as always. He could make black sound white and wrong sound right. Just now, Yuqi Song had clearly laid out the evidence. It was almost irrefutable. He was actually able to rely on his glib tongue to earn a place for himself. She had really underestimated him. Eldest young Master Jiang. Chu Luiyue suddenly spoke. According to what you said, the Jiang character on the phoenix-tailed zither has nothing to do with you. This Chaos Yuan gravel also has nothing to do with you, right? Jiang Yuqing's expression was indifferent, as if he was very frank. Yes. Back then, I was about to marry the Empress concubine. Why would I do these things and painstakingly scheme to harm her? Everyone looked at each other. Actually, this was also the most strange thing about them. Jiang Yuqing's status back then was definitely higher than the Empress concubine's. This marriage only had benefits for him, no harm at all. But any normal person wouldn't personally ruin their own future and happiness, right? One had to know that back then many young talents wanted this opportunity, but they didn't succeed. Because of his engagement with the Empress concubine, Jiang Yuqing had been envied by many of Xiling City's aristocratic families for a very long time. Back then, he really seemed to have been very attentive to the Empress concubine. There was really no reason for him to do this. No matter what he wanted, as long as he married the Empress concubine smoothly, wouldn't it be logical? Why did he have to go through so much trouble, killing the Empress concubine and eliminating the weeds by the roots? And in the end, it was just a big wedding with the third Princess Shangguanwan. Compared to the Empress concubine, it was even worse. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully as if she was also moved by his words. That's true. I heard that the Empress concubine treated you well back then, and you also won the Empress concubine's favor with great difficulty. Originally, everything was fine, so you really had no reason to betray her, right? She spoke slowly as if she was stating a fact, but also as if she was faintly puzzled. For some reason, when Jiang Yuqing looked at Chu Luiyue like this, an inexplicable sense of apprehension and panic arose in his heart. Her words seemed to be hinting at something. Chu Luiyue suddenly smiled. On her beautiful face, there was undisguised curiosity and mockery. When Jiang Yuqing saw her smile, he was actually in a trance. Her clear, black jade-like eyes seemed to have a dark light flowing, like a sharp sword, piercing straight at him. Since eldest young Master Jiang has such deep feelings for the Empress concubine, then back then, why did you join forces with Xiahou Rong to forge a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain, tricking the 13th Yu out of Xiling? Chu Luiyue said this sentence clearly and clearly. In an instant, almost everyone was stunned on the spot. The 13th Yu? Didn't they betray their master back then? For this reason, Jiang Yuqing even issued an order to kill them, which had not been revoked until today. What exactly did Chu Luiyue mean by forging a document to lure the tiger away from the mountain? Everyone's gaze fell on Jiang Yuqing. Even Xiahou Rong, who was originally standing in the crowd, instantly became the focus of everyone's attention. Xiahou Rong didn't expect Chu Luiyue to suddenly mention him and even directly reveal what happened back then. He was completely stunned and his face turned pale. He almost subconsciously retorted sternly. Chu Luiyue, what nonsense are you talking about? Chu Luiyue chuckled. I'm just telling the truth. You? How dare you? Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have the Chongshu Pavilion behind you. If you can't produce evidence today, don't blame me. Before he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue raised her hand and shook it gently. A secret letter appeared in front of everyone. This is the imperial edict that Lord Xiahou personally forged back then. Why don't Lord Xiahou take a look at it personally? The Love Network provided a better reading experience. Chapter 883. Xiahou Rong's voice stopped abruptly. He stared at the secret letter in Chu Luiyue's hands in shock. His face was as pale as a ghost and he instinctively denied it. Impossible. I've been keeping that item in my study, and even Xiahou Tingan doesn't know where I put it. How did it end up in Chu Luiyue's hands? Officer Xiahou, what exactly is going on? Jiang Yuqing's face was terrifyingly cold as he questioned. Xiahou Rong actually let Chu Luiyue get such an important item. Isn't he courting death? Xiahou Rong glanced at him and felt guilty. I didn't. I'm loyal to Her Majesty. How can I do such a thing? You'll know once you see it. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he passed the letter to Yuan Wei. Officer Yuan, you're very familiar with Her Majesty's handwriting. Why don't you take a look at it personally and see if there's anything wrong with this letter? Yuan Wei's expression turned solemn as he received it with both hands. This secret letter had already been opened by someone, but the remaining golden ink on it was clearly specially used by the royal family. Even the size and paper of this envelope were strictly according to the corresponding standards. Looking at it dazedly, it really looked the same as the real thing. He opened the envelope and took out a letter inside. There were only a few lines of words on it, and the main idea was that there was a dangerous situation at the borders and that the 13 U guards were ordered to deal with it. Logically speaking, the 13 U guards were the princess's private guards and wouldn't listen to anyone else's orders. However, as the princess would usually deal with many things at the borders, and this letter kept hinting that this matter might threaten the princess, the 13 U guards were persuaded to go together. As the princess's wedding was around the corner, it wasn't convenient for her to leave, so the 13 U guards let her stay in Xiling while they went to the borders alone and planned to return after dealing with this matter. They then realized that something was amiss and rushed back to Xiling with all their might, but they were still too late. These people had set up layers upon layers of traps in order to distract all the reliable forces around her and finally make a move on her. Chu Luiyue tried his best to guard against it, but he didn't expect these two people to plot to kill her. How could he defend against that? This envelope, this letter, this ink, and the seal are all exclusive to His Majesty. But this handwriting is not His Majesty's. Yuan Wei frowned. Furthermore, this secret letter does seem to be from 2 years ago. The Yuan family had always been loyal to the Tianling dynasty. Since Yuan Wei said so, then it was an indisputable fact. If that was the case, then everything would make sense. Back then, someone had first forged such a letter and transferred the 13 U guards out of Xiling. Then, taking advantage of the fact that there was no one by the princess' side, they had secretly tried to kill her. Finally, he did not forget to eliminate all those who wanted to investigate the truth. This series of methods could be said to be flawless. If someone hadn't planned this beforehand, it would have been impossible to achieve this. This was clearly forcing the Empress concubine into a dead end. Yuan Wei had a grave expression as he looked at Chu Luiyue. Miss Chu, may I ask if this letter was really found in the Xiahou residence? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Of course. In this world, there aren't many people who can forge such a genuine secret letter from His Majesty, right? Other than the handwriting, everything else is real. It was obvious that this was something that only a person who was deeply trusted by His Majesty could do. No matter how one thought about it, Xiahou Rong was one of the 3 Grand Tutors. He usually assisted His Majesty and had the most interactions with His Majesty. He was also the most convenient and easiest to do this. This time, even the surrounding officials' expressions changed as they looked at Xiahou Rong. Forging an imperial edict was a capital offense. If the situation was serious, it was very likely to implicate the 3 families. Was Xiahou Rong crazy? He actually dared to do such a thing. Lord Xiahou, don't you plan to explain? The gentle smile on Yuan Wei's face had disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. The Yuan family had never participated in the struggle for power in the imperial court. But if it involved His Majesty, then this matter was much more serious. They had to investigate to the end. Xiahou Rong made up his mind and intended to deny it. Chu Luiyue, you said that this was found in my Xiahou residence. Do you have evidence? Who knows if it was done by someone else? You're using it to frame me? I, Xiahou Rong, am loyal and devoted to His Majesty. I have never done anything to betray His Majesty. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Since Lord Xiahou is so determined, do you dare to swear? If you really did something to betray His Majesty, then the entire Xiahou family will be completely destroyed. Xiahou Rong choked, but he still braced himself and said, I have a clear conscience. Why wouldn't I dare? If I really betrayed His Majesty, then let me die without a burial place. Chu Luiyue crossed his arms and touched his chin. You haven't finished yet. Isn't there still the entire family? Xiahou Rong's eyes twitched fiercely. Chu Luiyue, don't go overboard. I'm going overboard? I'm trying my best to prove your innocence. Chu Luiyue widened his eyes slightly. Didn't you say yourself that your loyalty to His Majesty can be witnessed by heaven and earth? Why don't you dare to continue? Xiahou Rong was in a dilemma. If he didn't say it, Chu Luiyue and the others would definitely not let it go, and he would appear to be very guilty. But if he said it, there's a God watching over us. Lord Xiahou, if you are upright, what can't you say? Chu Luiyue said lightly, but every word was like an extremely sharp knife, forcing Xiahou Rong to a dead end bit by bit. No one in the surroundings spoke, but every gaze seemed to have materialized and landed on his body, forming an invisible pressure that made it difficult for him to breathe. Jiang Yuqing said coldly, Lord Xiahou, you have a clear conscience. Why can't you swear? If Xiahou Rong really tore a hole in him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth. I, Xiahou Rong, swear. If I really did something wrong to His Majesty, I'll let everyone in my Xiahou residence die a horrible death. Clap, clap, clap. In the dead silence, the sound of applause suddenly sounded from not far away. Clap after clap, extremely rhythmic. At the same time, a deep middle-aged man's voice followed. Lord Xiahou, well said. Hearing this voice, Xiahou Rong's face changed dramatically. Even Jiang Yuqing, Sheng Wanwan, and the others suddenly opened their eyes wide and looked back. They saw a person in a bright yellow dragon robe slowly walking out of Longkuan Hall. Perhaps because he was bedridden all year round, his figure was a lot thinner, but his frame was tall and his shoulders were straight. Standing there, he still had a noble aura around him. It was the current emperor of the Tianling dynasty, Sheng Wanyu. Digression, it's about 12:30 p.m., a little late. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the AI network. Chapter 884. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. If all the previous disputes were surging undercurrents, then the appearance of Shang Guanyu completely set off stormy waves in everyone's hearts. Everyone in the Tianling dynasty knew that the current emperor was seriously ill and in a coma, and had not woken up for 2 years. Many people even guessed that he might never wake up. Unexpectedly, not only did he wake up, but he also appeared at this time. Upon hearing this, Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat as she instinctively looked up. Although she had guessed that her father would appear today, she still couldn't suppress the joy and excitement in her heart when she saw him standing there with her own eyes. Seeing that familiar kind face, her mind went blank for a moment. Everything around her suddenly blurred at this moment, and only that one person occupied her sight and became clearer and clearer. Chu Liyue opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. All that was left in her heart was nostalgia at this moment. She finally saw him again. At that time she felt that there was no way out and her father was controlled by them, so she finally decided to commit suicide. However, after her rebirth, she inadvertently learned that her father was actually still alive, but in a coma. Although she didn't know why Sheng Wanwan and Jiang Yuqing didn't kill her father and even tried to wake him up later, it was a blessing for Chu Liyue. For this reason, she had been waiting patiently for many days and nights until this day finally came. The scene seemed to be still. Even Yu Qisong and others didn't expect Shang Guanyu's sudden appearance, and they all stood there in shock. Xiahou Rong reacted the fastest. Maybe it was because he had made a vow before or because he was called out, but he was the first to realize what had happened. He looked up at the man standing above in a daze and his lips trembled. Your Majesty? You're awake? His words finally woke the others up. Shang Guanyu looked up at the sky, narrowed his eyes and sighed with emotion. Yes, I'm awake. Why are you disappointed? I don't dare. Xiahou Rong immediately knelt down. Your humble servant is overjoyed that your Majesty has awakened. How can I be disappointed? Jiang Yuqing also straightened his expression and knelt down to salute. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Congratulations, Your Majesty. This action finally moved the others. Everyone in the square in front of the palace fell to their knees. Their shouts shook the heavens. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Long live His Majesty. Shang Guanyu lowered his eyes and looked at the people kneeling before him. His gaze was obscure. Get up. Only then did everyone stand up one by one. However, with Shang Guanyu's presence, the atmosphere had changed greatly compared to before. Most people chose to keep quiet, afraid that they would say or do something wrong and bring trouble to themselves. However, anyone with a brain would have reacted at this moment. How was today a wedding and coronation? This was clearly a trap set up by someone. They were just waiting for a good show to begin. On the surface, everything seemed calm and tranquil, but in reality the undercurrent was already surging. Jiang Yuqing glanced at Shang Guanwan and reminded her, His Majesty has woken up. Now your previous efforts are not in vain. Shang Guanwan was stunned and quickly realized something. Her expression changed and her eyes turned red instantly. Father? She quickly ran forward and 2 lines of tears flowed down. It seemed that she was crying tears of joy. Won'er greets father. Father, it's great that you're awake. As she spoke, she touched her face. Guing murmured in self-pity, seeing father safe and sound, Won'er's injury is worth it. Shang Guanyu glanced at her quietly, but there was no heartache on his face. It seemed that he was indifferent. Immediately he asked faintly, look at this scene. Are you going to ascend the throne? Shang Guanwan's crying suddenly disappeared as if it had been forcibly cut off by someone. A trace of panic flashed across her face. She didn't even have time to wipe her tears and hurriedly said, No. Because you haven't woken up, so. As an emperor, what he feared the most was that someone coveted his position. Shang Guanwan had obviously violated the taboo. Speaking of which, the Tianling dynasty couldn't always be without a leader, and it was reasonable for her to ascend the throne. But in front of Shang Guanyu, these words didn't sound right. After all, he wasn't dead yet. Especially now that he had woken up. When did you wake up? I didn't know. I've neglected my duty. Shang Guanwan tried to salvage the situation for herself. However, this trick obviously didn't work on Shang Guanyu. It's all thanks to Master's meticulous care that I could wake up so smoothly. Shang Guanwan was stunned. Master Zhuo? At this moment, another person walked out from behind Shang Guanyu. Was Zhuo Mingxi. Everyone was stunned for a moment. There was another Zhuo Mingxi beside Shang Guanwan. How could there be 2 of them? Who are you? Shang Guanwan's expression changed and she shouted harshly. The Zhuo Mingxi, standing on top of the stairs, suddenly chuckled. Why are you shouting? Don't you all know me? As he spoke, he took off the mask on his face. He was handsome and his eyes were as clear as ice. His smile was charming. It was Jian Fengqi. The moment Shang Guanwan saw Jian Fengqi, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Jiang Yuqing suddenly realized something, and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. Could it be? Standing on the 9th step, Shang Guanyu turned his eyes slightly and looked at Chu Liyue, smiling slightly. Miss Chu, right? Don't worry, I'll be your witness. Chu Liyue's nose twitched and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 885. Remember, Love Network, in 1 second and provide you with wonderful reading. She lowered her eyes and concealed the emotion of the cigarette butt. When she looked up again, her eyes were as clear and bright as obsidian that had just been soaked in water. She bent her knees and curtsied, moving her lips. Thank you, Your Majesty. Shang Guanyu looked at the woman standing below and for some reason, his heart suddenly moved. In fact, when he pretended to be unconscious before, he had heard her voice. At that time he only thought that this was a smart, quick-witted, decisive woman. Although her status was not high, she could still use all kinds of conditions to force Shang Guanwan and turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Now that he saw her, he realized that she was actually like this. For some reason he felt that he had seen her somewhere before. He quickly recalled in his mind, but after thinking about it, he really had not seen her before. For nearly 2 years he was basically sick in bed and stayed in Qingfeng Palace, day and night. He even rarely saw other people in the palace, not to mention people like Chu Liyue who came from outside Heaven's canopy. Probably because her eyebrows and eyes were too similar to Yu's. Thinking of this, Shang Guanyu felt a burst of pain in his heart, and looked at Chu Liyue with more benevolence. You worked so hard for you, and I should thank you. If you hadn't taken the initiative to reinvestigate the matter of that year, I'm afraid that many people might be free and happy for a long time. When he said the second half of the sentence, Shang Guanyu's tone was completely cold. Although he didn't scold him, his low and majestic tone was full of the emperor's power, which made people breathless. On the square in front of Langkuan Palace, everyone quieted down and kept quiet out of fear. Yuan, let me have a look at that letter. Hearing this, Yuan Wei immediately responded, stepped forward respectfully, and presented the secret letter with both hands. Shang Guanyu unfolded it and read it carefully. Xiahou Rong stood with his hands down, cold sweat constantly coming out of his forehead. His heart was beating wildly, and all the blood in his body was surging up, as if even his eardrums were about to burst. After a while his back was all wet. Only a short period of time had passed, yet he actually felt that each day was like a year, and it was extremely torturous. Finally, in this suffocating atmosphere, Shang Guanyu finally opened his mouth. We have never written this letter. His words were clear and light, but they were like thunder that exploded in everyone's hearts. He didn't write anything. That proved that this letter was indeed forged by someone else. No one answered. The air seemed to freeze inch by inch. Shang Guanyu looked at Xiahou Rong. The date on this letter is the 3rd of July. That day I was discussing matters with Lord Xiahou in the imperial study, but for some reason I felt very tired, so I asked Lord Xiahou to leave first and go to the side room to rest. When I woke up again, it was already today. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Didn't they always say that because His Majesty heard about the death of the Empress concubine, he was extremely grief-stricken and was unable to get out of bed? Why did His Majesty say that he had been in a coma since the 3rd of July? One had to know that when the Empress concubine died, it was the 10th of July. At this time, who couldn't tell the problem in it? At that time, it was obvious that someone had done something to His Majesty, causing him to fall into a coma. At the same time, this fake document was forged to deceive the 13U to leave West Hill and then take the opportunity to assassinate the Empress concubine. It was self-evident who did this. Who else could it be but Xiahou Rong? Lord Xiahou, it seems that you didn't leave the imperial study immediately that day. Instead you did a lot of tricks. Shang Guanyu looked down at Xiahou Rong condescendingly, waved his sleeve lightly, and threw the secret letter to Xiahou Rong. Look at it yourself. Did you write this? Xiahou Rong finally couldn't bear it and knelt down with a plop. Your Majesty, you are so wise. I'm innocent. I really didn't do anything. Xiahou Rong cried out while secretly regretting it in his heart. The reason why he kept this letter was actually to use it as evidence to suppress Jiang Yuqing. Although they had done a lot of things together, they didn't trust each other very much. That was why he kept this thing as a precaution. However, I didn't expect Chu Luiyue to find this letter and His Majesty to personally identify it. Now he really couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the river. If he had known this, he should have destroyed this secret letter directly at the beginning. In the face of such irrefutable evidence, Xiahou Rong's defense and crying seemed very pale and powerless. Just now when I was inside, I seemed to have heard Lord Xiahou swearing on the whole Xiahou mansion that if they really betrayed me, they would all die a horrible death. Xiahou Rong was suddenly stunned, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in his heart. Your Majesty, Lord Xiahou, I didn't expect you to be so cruel to your own people, Shang Guanyu said lightly and shook his head. After all, I misjudged you. Your Majesty, I really didn't do anything to let you down. Someone is framing me. Someone is framing me. Your Majesty, you are so wise. Xiahou Rong was shocked and hurriedly knelt forward. But before he reached the 9 steps, Shang Guanyu had already opened his mouth. Xiahou Rong rebelled against his superiors and attempted to murder me. This is the first crime. Faking the secret edict and deceiving his superiors is the second crime. As punishment for these 2 crimes, Xiahou Rong's position as Grand Tutor will be removed and he will be demoted to a slave. He will be beheaded in public at noon tomorrow. In addition, Xiahou Mansion's 3 close relatives will be implicated. The 3 distant relatives, regardless of their gender, will all be sent to the frontier as slaves. They will never be able to return. Each and every word echoed clearly in front of the main hall. Xiahou Rong's movements suddenly paused and he knelt on the ground dejectedly. The last trace of blood on his face faded in an instant. In an instant, all the strength in his body seemed to have been sucked away, and even his breathing became difficult. It's over, it's over. With this sentence, the entire Xiahou family would be completely destroyed. His wives, concubines, his relatives and clansmen. Being sent to the frontier as slaves was more terrible than being beheaded directly. It was really a fate worse than death. Your Majesty, please have mercy. For the sake of the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty, please spare my wives and children. If the Xiahou family was destroyed in his hands, he would become the sinner of the whole family. Shang Guanyu looked at him with deep eyes. Xiahou Rong, you also know that the Xiahou family's 100 years of loyalty was defeated by you. After all, he had only himself to blame for all this. Xiahou Rong sat on the ground, his heart completely cold. Take him away. Shang Guanyu waved his hand. Just when the people next to him were about to step forward, Xiahou Rong suddenly turned back and pointed at Jiang Yuqing fiercely, shouting with a ferocious look, "It's him! He and the third princess forced me to do this." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 886. If you want to die, let's all die together. At this time, Xiahou Rong had obviously gone completely crazy. His Majesty's imperial edict had been issued, and the Xiahou clan would have no chance of turning things around. The entire clan, a total of thousands of people, would all be implicated. And the ones who caused all this were Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan. Since he couldn't live then, no one would have an easy time. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted. He stared coldly at Xiahou Rong. Lord Xiahou, watch your words. Don't drag other innocent people down just because you made a big mistake and implicate the entire clan. Sheng Guanwan also panicked and hurriedly refuted. That's right. This matter has nothing to do with me. Xiahou Rong, don't talk nonsense. Innocent people? Spouting nonsense. Xiahou Rong laughed sarcastically. Jiang Yuqing, are you saying that you're innocent now? Weren't you the one who gave me the drug to His Majesty? Now you jump out to say that you're innocent and want to push all the blame to me to get rid of it? In your dreams? Xiahou Rong simply went all out and directly exposed everything. Everyone was shocked on the spot. The amount of information contained in this sentence was too much. The drug to His Majesty was given by Jiang Yuqing? Didn't that mean that Jiang Yuqing was also involved? If you hadn't promised to give me the 9 clouds yuan recovery pill after everything was done, I wouldn't have agreed to do these things for you. Now that everything has been exposed, no one can escape. He was doomed, so he had to drag a few people down with him. Jiang Yuqing's temples were throbbing, and he couldn't wait to immediately step forward and block Xiahou Rong's mouth. His face was livid, his fists clenched, and he suddenly sneered. Lord Xiahou, you said that I gave you the drug back then. Do you have any evidence? Empty words without any proof. If whatever you say is the truth, then wouldn't everyone here be at your mercy? Xiahou Rong froze and immediately clenched his teeth. Everything that happened back then was done very discreetly. Even that medicine was given to him by Jiang Yuqing in private. Other than the two of them, no one else could prove it. If Jiang Yuqing stubbornly refused to admit it, then it would really be difficult to convict him. Furthermore, my Jiang family is a large Tianling family, and I'm about to marry the princess. What reason do I have to spend so much effort to harm His Majesty first and then the princess? Xiahou Rong gritted his teeth in anger. This Jiang Yuqing was truly treacherous. This wasn't the only thing he had done back then. Now, he had turned hostile and refused to admit it. That 9 clouds yuan recovery pill was given to me by you as a reward. You dare to deny it? You have to know that after the Empress concubine's death, her funeral was handled by you and the third princess. Only the two of you can obtain the 9 heavens yuan returning pill. Oh, since that's the case, could Lord Xiahou please take out the 9 clouds yuan recovery elixir to prove that you're not lying? Jiang Yuqing asked back. Xiahou Rong had just lost this item a few days ago, so it was impossible for him to take it out now. Sure enough, when Xiahou Rong heard this, he immediately choked and his face turned red. You know that, it seems that Lord Xiahou can't take it out. Jiang Yuqing interrupted him. In that case, please don't make irresponsible remarks again, Lord Xiahou. It's here. Before he could finish speaking, a clear voice suddenly sounded from the side. Jiang Yuqing's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw Chu Liwei smiling as she took out a black wooden box. The moment he saw that box, Jiang Yuqing's heart suddenly sank. Wasn't this thing stolen? Why was it here with Chu Liwei? He recalled that the previous secret letter was also stolen from the Xiahou residence. Could it be that all these things were done by Chu Liwei alone? But she was clearly still in the Dahuang swamp some time ago. How could, this should be what you're looking for, right? Chu Liwei shook the box in her hand and smiled meaningfully. I can prove that this thing was indeed plundered from Lord Xiahou's study. Because she had already taken out the secret letter earlier, everyone was very convinced by her words. The 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill was the only 9th grade essence pill left behind by Taizu. It had always been carefully enshrined by the Tianling royal family. Previously, His Majesty had indeed bestowed it to the Empress for safekeeping. After the Empress's death, these items were all handled by the 3rd Princess and Jiang Yuqing. Such an important item like the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill actually appeared in Chu Liyue's hands. Clearly it had been taken away before. This just happened to confirm Xiahou Rong's previous words. Jiang Yuqing used the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill as a reward to help him drug His Majesty and forge a document. Chu Liyue handed the wooden box to Yuan Wei. "Your Majesty, please take a look." Yuan Wei took the item and carefully opened the box. A strong medicinal fragrance instantly spread out. Shang Guanyu's expression changed slightly. "This is indeed the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill." He looked at Jiang Yuqing. "Jiang Yuqing, what else do you have to say?" Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth. "Yes. I didn't take good care of it, so this 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill was stolen. However, what Lord Xiahou said just now was indeed slander. Your Majesty, please investigate clearly." He was determined to deny it to the end. Xiahou Rong was extremely resentful and began to search in his mind. He wanted to directly kill Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan as well. But after thinking about it, he was shocked to realize that he really couldn't produce any strong evidence. Jiang Yuqing had always been cautious and didn't leave any traces. Every time they discussed things, there was no one else present. Even now that the 9 Clouds Yuan recovery pill had been taken out, he still said that it was his lack of supervision that led to the theft and that he didn't send it out himself. Apart from this mouth, Xiahou Rong couldn't do anything to Jiang Yuqing. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. He pointed at the two and scolded, "Good, good, good. You don't want to admit it now, right? Then I'd like to ask, if you didn't do anything to His Majesty, then why did you guard Qingfeng Hall so strictly in the past 2 years and even sent 3 celestial physicians to take care of it in turn? If this isn't a guilty conscience, then what is it?" As he said this, he suddenly looked at the crowd and sternly shouted, "Let's go. Xiong Yishui, Xialang. Do you dare to stand up and tell everyone what's going on with His Majesty's body? Right, and Zhuo Mingxi. The 3 of you have been responsible for taking care of His Majesty from the beginning. Now you can at least say a few words, right?" From the moment Shang Guanyu came out, Xiong Yishui and the others had been completely shocked. The 3 of them had indeed taken turns to take care of His Majesty, but they had never seen any signs of His Majesty waking up before. Now that they thought about it, maybe His Majesty had already woken up. Suddenly being pointed at, the faces of the 3 of them became very ugly, and they stammered and couldn't say anything. Jian Fengqi chuckled and said, "Since the 3 of you don't want to say anything, why don't I tell everyone?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 887. Jian Fengqi flung the mask in his hand and smiled flirtatiously. "Speaking of which, I've been taking care of His Majesty for a long time. Although I'm using Lord Zhuo Mingxi's name, it's for His Majesty's own good. I believe that everyone here is loyal to His Majesty and won't mind, right?" This hat was too big, so no one dared to say no. The fact that he could stand by His Majesty's side and walk out of Longquan Hall with His Majesty proved that His Majesty trusted him greatly. How could others say anything? "Actually, we have to start with the 3rd princess," Jian Fengqi said with a smile. "I still remember clearly that when I entered the palace as Lord Zhuo for the first time, I happened to meet the 3rd princess. Does the 3rd princess still remember what you said at that time?" Shang Guanwan's face turned pale. She didn't even know when Jian Fengqi had pretended to be Zhuo Mingxi. How could she remember what she said? But she had always trusted Zhuo Mingxi. She didn't hide anything from him about His Majesty. At that time, the 3rd princess was very worried about His Majesty, so she asked me to reduce the dosage of medicine and find a way to wake His Majesty up. Jian Fengqi applauded sincerely. Clap, clap, clap. The 3rd princess's filial piety can be seen by heaven and earth. In order to wake His Majesty up again, she was even willing to reduce the dosage of medicine for His Majesty. Based on this point alone, no one here can compare to her, right? Jian Fengqi's words were like a sharp sword that directly pierced Shang Guanwan's hypocrisy. Her strong and calm expression finally cracked. I didn't," she subconsciously retorted, but her expression was panicked and her footsteps were unsteady. He was right. Shang Guanwan finally couldn't hold back. She gritted her teeth and said hatefully to Zuomingshi beside her. Zuomingshi, I trusted you so much. How dare you deceive and betray me? If he hadn't teamed up with Jian Fengqi, this wouldn't have happened. I don't know anything. Zuomingshi wanted to say something but he felt guilty and didn't know what to say. It was true that he did not know that Jian Fengqi had been secretly using his name to enter the palace, but he was not completely unaware. During this period of time, he occasionally felt that he seemed to have become more sleepy than before, and his mind seemed to have become muddled. Especially when it was his turn to be on duty, this feeling became even more intense. He vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he didn't dare to say anything. He was afraid that if Shangguan and the others found out, they would immediately kill him to silence him. But he didn't expect that he still couldn't hide it. And today things had turned out this way. Shangguan's heart was filled with hatred, but she also knew that it was useless to say these things now. The only way was to get rid of these things as much as possible and prove his innocence. But how could it be that easy? She thought back to when she was in the Clear Wind Palace. She had taken advantage of the fact that her imperial father had not regained consciousness and had said many things without concealing anything. If imperial father were to find out about it, oh right, there's also Jiang Yuqing. Jian Fengqi's eyes turned slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up into a wicked smile. His eyes were full of sarcasm. Later on you also said something similar. I still remember it clearly. The expression on Jiang Yuqing's face seemed to have frozen. His eyebrows, eyes, mouth and nose were all terrifyingly cold and stiff. The previous scenes kept flashing in his mind. No wonder he felt that Zuomingshi was a little strange some time ago. It turned out that it was because there was indeed a change of people. When he saw Jian Fengqi coming out with his Imperial Majesty just now, he felt very uneasy. Now it really exploded. No matter whether Jian Fengqi was telling the truth or not, he and Shangguan couldn't deny it. After all, he was standing beside his Imperial Majesty now. What Jian Fengqi said now obviously had his Imperial Majesty's permission, and even, he was representing his Imperial Majesty's position. The number of times this young master has entered the palace is actually not many. But whenever I meet the two of you, I have to talk about the matter of using medicine back then. Wasn't that what Lord Xiaohou was talking about just now? What, you still refuse to admit it? The evidence was already in their faces, but they still refused to admit it. How thick-skinned. Dead silence. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan both fell silent. This was no longer a matter that could be cleared of suspicion by denying it. After all, it was very likely that his Imperial Majesty also knew about many of these things. If he had already woken up, then, many things were already set in stone. But just when everyone thought that the truth was out and they were finally going to admit their guilt, Jiang Yuqing suddenly spoke. I really didn't know about his Imperial Majesty being poisoned back then. One told me that his Imperial Majesty had taken too much medicine in order to nurse his body back then. That was why he had been in a coma for so long. We did discuss about using less medicine for a long time, but I didn't know it was poison. Hearing this, Shangguan gradually widened her eyes in shock and looked at Jiang Yuqing in disbelief. What did you say? Jiang Yuqing looked apologetic. I'm sorry, I was deceived by you before, so I helped you. But now that things are clear, then I can't speak up for you anymore. You have to bear the corresponding responsibility for what you've done. Chu Liwei was secretly amazed. If it weren't for the inappropriate atmosphere now, she would have applauded Jiang Yuqing's ability to refute. She had seen what it meant to reverse right and wrong today. Seeing that the matter had been exposed, he took the initiative to abandon Shangguan and only wanted to protect himself. But then again, this kind of ruthlessness and cruelty was his usual style. How could Shangguan be his opponent? Sure enough, after hearing these words, Shangguan completely exploded after a short period of shock. Jiang Yuqing. What are you talking about? You want to push all the blame onto me now, don't you? Fine. Since you're heartless, don't blame me for being heartless. Shangguan took a step forward, walked to the middle and said in a sharp voice, what Xiahou Rong said just now was right. Everything was ordered by Jiang Yuqing. He was the one who attacked father and transferred the 13 Yu guards away. He was also the one who secretly sent people to attack the Chongshu pavilion. He was the mastermind of all these things. The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead bulged. He lowered his voice and said coldly, you're confused. But Shangguan didn't care. She had lost all faith today and was already emotionally unstable. Coupled with Jian Fengqi and the others' provocation, she couldn't bear it anymore. Anyway, she couldn't deny it, and it would be difficult for her to make a comeback in the future. Not to mention that she had no fate with the throne, she might not even be able to keep her identity as the third princess. After today it was still unknown whether she would live or die. At this time Jiang Yuqing actually took the initiative to betray her, so she had no mercy for him. She stared at Jiang Yuqing with scarlet eyes and sneered, "Ha! What, you don't want to admit it? Don't forget, you were the one who drugged Shangguanyu with the energy-dissipating powder for 3 years. Finally, you attacked her on the eve of the wedding and imprisoned her in the Imperial Ancestral Temple." Digression. The last 2 updates may be a little late, about 1:30. Please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Iowa. Chapter 888. She was such a smart person. If she wasn't someone close to him, how could she have fallen into a trap and died in the end? Shangguanwan laughed crazily. Because of anger and resentment, her facial features were distorted and her eyes were scarlet. She looked like an evil ghost. Don't forget that you have a share of the pain she suffered before she died. The sharp voice pierced through the sky, making everyone's heart turn cold. As soon as the voice fell, everyone's face was filled with horror. Shangguanwan? What did she just say? She said that it was Jiang Yuqing who killed the crown princess. He even planned for it for 3 years. The crown princess didn't die from the so-called qi deviation during cultivation. She was forced to a dead end by them and finally chose to commit suicide. In just a few words, a shocking secret was revealed. Even Yu Qisong and the others who had already guessed that it was Jiang Yuqing who killed the crown princess were shocked when they heard this. Shangguanyu suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest and he staggered. Yuan Wei and Jian Fengqi immediately went forward to support him. "Your Majesty, you have to take care." Yuan Wei wanted to persuade more, but when the words reached his mouth, he didn't know how to say it. The crown princess had always been His Majesty's favorite child. Since young, His Majesty had poured a lot of effort into the crown princess. Usually, even if the crown princess suffered a small injury, His Majesty would always feel distressed. Whether it was the coming-of-age ceremony, the imperial court, or the big wedding later, His Majesty always wanted to give the crown princess the best for everything related to her. And that child whom he had doted on and was afraid of suffering even the slightest grievance, was now being plotted against and killed. How could he bear it? Jian Fengqi watched from the side, and the smile on his face had already faded. Even when His Majesty knew that it was Shangguanwan who killed him, His Majesty didn't show such an expression. It could be seen how big of a blow Shangguanyu's death was to him. "Your Majesty," Shangguanyu waved his hand and slowly broke away from the two's support. However, he seemed to have aged a lot in an instant, and his face seemed to be covered with a layer of gray. He looked at Shangguanwan and Jiang Yuqing, suppressing the huge grief and anger in his heart, and asked word by word, "I only ask, did she do anything wrong to you? You actually want to harm her like this?" When Ur was plotted against His Majesty's death, His Majesty's heart. His Majesty's heart ached. To this day it was just a matter of a few sentences, but hidden within it was how much pain Ur had gone through. Burying all the torture she had endured. Even if these people died 10,000 times His Majesty's estes. She shrieked, "Teat hurt you her. It's as if I was the one who had wronged her. But what she gave me was nothing but charity. Who cared about that? Fathers, I'm also your daughter, but have you ever looked me in the eyes since I was young? When I didn't have enough to eat or warm clothes, and when I was bullied in the palace, did you ever think of me as your daughter? You only have Shangguanyu in your eyes." Shangguanwan's voice trembled, as if she wanted to vent all her years of accumulated resentment. Only needs to wave her hand and she can get whatever she wants easily. She has a magnificent and spacious palace and a high position. She can even take away the man I've liked for many years with just a word. What do I have? If I don't please her and rely on her, I'll have nothing. She's had enough of this lowly life of having to rely on others. Therefore she wanted to snatch Huayang Palace, the throne, and even Jiang Yuqing. Shangguanyu looked at Shangguanwan, who seemed to have gone crazy, with a cold and solemn face and a pained look in his eyes. "Even if I've neglected you, you should have come to me. Why did you put all the blame on Ur? You said it was charity, and if you didn't want it, you could have just said so. You enjoyed her kindness on one hand, but on the other hand, you were jealous and resentful of her. What did she do wrong? In the end, Ur was jealous of Shangguanyu, so she couldn't bear to see her living well and tried every means to harm her. After doing so many wrong things, she still blamed Shang Guanyu for her betrayal and hurt. She was really unreasonable. Shang Guanwan choked and couldn't say a word. Her chest rose and fell violently, but after a while she suddenly laughed. See, you're still thinking about her at this time. Unfortunately, she's dead. She's completely dead. Ah. No matter how sad these people are, Shang Guanyu's will never come back to life. Even if everything was exposed today, she thought to herself, even if Shang Guanyu was exposed, she thought to herself. She then looked at Jiang Yuqing with a tinge of craziness in her eyes. Yuqing, since I've already admitted it, you should admit it too. Anyway, we did all those things together, didn't we? See, so many people like her and love her. Even though she's been dead for so long, there are still people running around for her just to ask for an answer. But we have nothing. Only I like you, do you know that? Only I. As she spoke, she reached out and wanted to pull Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing silently took a step back and avoided her hand as he expressionlessly said, Shang Guanwan, you're really crazy. You treated you like her biological sister, but you treated her like this. I was wrong about you. Shang Guanwan was dazed and then realized that he still refused to admit it. She stared at him for a while and laughed in self-mockery. I'm really stupid. I actually believed you. You missed her for 10 years, but didn't you do it to her without hesitation in the end? What am I? Jiang Yuqing, this person, can even do it to the woman he liked for so many years. Not to mention the others. I, Shang Guanwan, am actually just a chess piece for him. Thinking back on everything that happened these few years, it's like a joke. Jiang Yuqing cupped his fists toward Shang Guanyu and said, Your Majesty, I know that my explanation is very weak, but I really don't know about these things. Jiang Yuqing, we've already reached this stage, but you're still unwilling to admit it, right? Chu Liwei suddenly asked. Jiang Yuqing paused and looked straight at her. If I didn't do it, why should I admit it? Shang Guanwan's mind isn't clear now, and her words can't be trusted. Oh? Chu Liwei suddenly laughed. If her words can't be trusted, then, what about mine? Jiang Yuqing was dumbfounded. Chu Liwei suddenly took a step forward, and there seemed to be flames burning in her eyes. Swish, she raised the Tianling scepter high and then lowered it. The dragon's eyes shone and pointed straight ahead, full of majesty. I forgot to introduce myself. Double quotes. I'm Shang Guanyu. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 889. This Empress, Shang Guanyu? The sentence was clear and powerful. It was just a few words, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Too many things had happened today. Explosive news came one after another. Just when everyone thought that they had become numb from the continuous bombardment of all kinds of secret news, Chu Liyue's words instantly set off huge waves in their hearts. It was like a blow to the head. Everyone was shocked on the spot again. This was even more impactful than the previous ones added together. It wasn't just Jiang Yuqing and the others. Shang Guanyu, Jian Fengqi, Yuqi Song, everyone who had previously agreed to join forces to deal with Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan today was also shocked at this moment. No one expected that Chu Liwei would jump out and say such a thing when things were getting out of hand. There was a frightening silence in the field. At this moment, it seemed like even breathing had become extra redundant. Everyone looked at Chu Liwei with their mouths agape. They still couldn't digest what she said just now. The mask on Jiang Yuqing's face finally cracked at this moment. He stared at Chu Liwei in shock as he stuttered, which was rare of him. You. What did you say? Who are you? Chu Liyue's red lips curved into a smile. This smile was filled with a myriad of magnificence. It was incomparably noble. In an instant, it was as high as the sun in the clouds and unattainable. In an instant it was brilliant and dazzling. It carried a noble aura. It made people unconsciously want to submit to her. Everyone's attention was unconsciously attracted by the woman on the field. She was tall and slender. She was dressed in red and her fine black hair was tied up simply. It was simple and neat to the extreme. She clearly didn't do anything, but the aura on her body had undergone a huge change in an instant. At this moment she was like a pearl covered in dust that had finally wiped off the layer of dust, blooming with the light that originally belonged to her. The same thought flashed through almost everyone's mind. This is her. This is Chu Liyue. No, perhaps it should be Shang Guanyu. She stood with her back straight, one hand gripping the heavenly writ scepter tightly as she pointed it at Jiang Yuqing. Every word was like the judgment of a saint. Jiang Yuqing, are you very disappointed that this consort didn't die? If you're still unwilling to admit to everything you've done, then today I'll be the last witness. Who would have thought that things would develop to this point? Princess didn't die. She actually didn't die. The woman who was rumored to have completely disappeared 2 years ago had actually returned? In the blink of an eye, countless thoughts flashed through Jiang Yuqing's mind. No, that's impossible. Back then he had specially sent people to investigate Chu Liyue's background, and everything had shown that there was no problem. How did she suddenly become Shang Guanyu? You're not her. Jiang Yuqing almost immediately denied it. She died 2 years ago. There's absolutely no other possibility. Chu Liyue, don't play tricks here. Do you know what kind of crime it is to impersonate princess? Although Jiang Yuqing refuted it verbally, he wasn't sure either. If Chu Liyue was really Shang Guanyu, then many things could be explained. That similar eyebrows and expression, that shocking talent and strength, and the heavenly writ scepter. He was wondering why the heavenly writ scepter was so close to Chu Liyue. If she was Shang Guanyu, then there was nothing to doubt. Chu Liyue lifted her chin slightly, her gaze cold as if she was looking at an ant. Are you doubting this consort's identity? You're clearly just an abandoned daughter from a small empire outside heaven's canopy. Jiang Yuqing immediately retorted as he stared at Chu Liyue's face. Your appearance, figure, age. Everything is right here. There's no mistaking it. You definitely can't be Shang Guanyu. That's right. That bitch is already dead. How can she still be alive? Shang Guanwan, who was beside him, could not help but shout. She pointed at Chu Liyue with resentment in her eyes. You're just lying. On the day of the wedding, she had already fallen to such a state. She thought that she was already battered and exhausted. Who knew that Chu Liyue actually dared to call her Shang Guanyu? Shang Guanwan wasn't afraid of everything she had done before being exposed in public. She also didn't care about the contemptuous gazes of these people. But she absolutely couldn't allow Shang Guanyu to be alive. Absolutely not. At this moment, everyone was looking at Chu Liyue with different gazes. Shock, suspicion, surprise, nervousness. Are you really you? Shang Guanyu stared at Chu Liyue without blinking and finally couldn't help but ask. In fact, the moment she opened her mouth, he had already confirmed in his heart that this was his you. In this world, only you would have such a look. No wonder he felt very close to her when he first saw her from afar. It turned out that, however, the more he missed her, the more he longed for her, the more he was afraid that all this was a dream. Shang Guanyu's tone was careful, as if he was afraid of disturbing something and breaking the dreamlike scene in front of him. There seemed to be something surging in Chu Liyue's heart. She choked in her throat, but there was a bright smile on her lips. Father, it's me. One sentence was enough. The tip of Shang Guanyu's nose twitched, and his eyes lit up immediately. It's you. It's my you. Impossible. Shang Guanwan's heart was full of hatred. Shang Guanyu has the Tianjin Yuan meridian and you just have the Daijing. How can you be her? Chu Liyue turned her eyes slightly and looked at Shang Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing, who were almost crazy. She was very clear that the two of them were not the only ones who were suspicious. You want me to prove my identity? Then I'll satisfy you. She suddenly let out a clear shout. Long Yuan sword. Buzz. With a command, heaven and earth shook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 890. Dark clouds quickly gathered in the originally clear sky, forming a huge black vortex above everyone's head. The wind swirled the clouds and covered the sky. In an instant, the sky darkened. Then, a ferocious and vast aura suddenly descended. The Tianling scepter in Chu Liyue's hand seemed to have sensed something, and it suddenly vibrated. She raised her wrist, and the Tianling scepter quickly flew up and landed back on the black obsidian. The golden light in the dragon's eyes shone in all directions. Brilliant and colorful. Rumble. Following this low and powerful explosion, everyone's hearts trembled and they all looked up. They saw a huge black shadow breaking out of the crazily swirling dark clouds and slowly descending. It was a sword. It was black all over and looked ancient and majestic. Only in the middle was an extremely thin silver groove, and one could vaguely see icy blue lightning flashing and swimming in it. Tianlei's aura was impressive. The hilt of the sword was also black, and the dragon engravings on it were clearly visible and lifelike. As it gradually descended, a hole was instantly torn in the sky. From top to bottom it was straight and hard. The sharp and terrifying sword aura, wrapped in a biting cold aura, shocked the world. That's the Long Yuan sword. Elder Qingku was the first to react. His eyes widened, and his old face was filled with shock and disbelief. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. The Long Yuan sword. It's really the Long Yuan sword? Is this the supreme treasure sword that was rumored to have been forged by the great ancestor himself and used to open up new territories and create the Tianling dynasty? Sheng Guanyu also stared at the sword in the air and said in a deep voice, "That's right. That's right. That's indeed the Long Yuan sword. I didn't expect that I would be able to see the Long Yuan sword being brought out of the Tianling god realm in my lifetime." Even Sheng Guanyu, who had seen countless storms and waves, couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes when he saw this scene. For thousands of years, the people of the Tianling dynasty had always wanted to bring the Long Yuan sword back to the world, but they had failed time and time again. No matter who it was, no matter what method they used, it seemed like they couldn't do it. Gradually, this became an obsession in their hearts. In the end, it was a precious item left behind by the Taizu, and it was also the origin tool that the Taizu valued the most. Its significance was extraordinary. Therefore, even though they failed time and time again, the people of the Tianling royal family never gave up and kept trying. Over the long years, countless people had been injured because of this, and some had even lost their lives. Even Sheng Guanyu had attempted to enter the Tianling god realm back then. Unfortunately, he had returned with injuries. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that such a sacred object that only existed in legends would actually appear before their eyes. Then, under the gazes of countless pairs of eyes, the dragon abyss sword flew into Chu Liyue's hand. She gripped the hilt of the sword and injected a stream of force into it. A sword hum rang out. It was like the roar of a dragon. At the same time, she raised her arm and raised her sword high. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to crazily gather towards the Long Yuan sword. Claps of thunder could be heard. It was almost deafening. Long Yuan sword, fall. Chu Liyue shouted. The black sword in her hand slashed down instantly. In an instant, it was as if an invisible hand had torn the sky apart. The swirling clouds suddenly split from the middle and quickly dispersed to both sides. The storm abruptly stopped, and then transformed into two violent waves that spiraled downwards like swimming dragons. Strong winds blew everywhere. The sky above the Longquan Palace actually started to collapse silently. Inch by inch, darkness engulfed the void at a speed visible to the naked eye. The power of the Long Yuan sword was evident. The Tianling scepter instantly shone brightly. A faint golden light transformed into a barrier that enveloped the Longquan Palace. The black space collapsed and finally stopped at the edge of the barrier. However, the people standing below could still not help but feel that tyrannical and terrifying pressure. Everyone was shocked and shocked. So, this is the true pressure of the Long Yuan sword. No wonder the Tianling royal family had been trying to invite it out for the past 1,000 years. Once such a divine artifact was used, what was there to be afraid of? In the next instant, a black sword aura flew out from the Long Yuan sword. It went straight for Jiang Yuqing. Jiang Yuqing's heart sank fiercely. Danger. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately leaped into the air. He quickly retreated to the back. If this attack landed on him, the consequences would be unimaginable. As a Stage 7 warrior, his combat power was not considered weak. In fact, compared to most of the people present, he was still considered a strong one. However, at this moment, facing the rapidly approaching sword aura, a deep sense of fear and panic surged in Jiang Yuqing's heart. Hence, from the beginning, he directly mobilized all his force and used his fastest speed to retreat without holding back. In the blink of an eye, he had already retreated tens of feet. However, although Jiang Yuqing was fast, the Long Yuan sword aura was even faster. Everyone only saw a black sword aura piercing through the air. In the next moment, it had already caught up to Jiang Yuqing. At this moment, the strong wind blew Jiang Yuqing's clothes, and his black hair danced wildly in the wind. He could almost feel the pain between his eyebrows as if it was about to be cut by the sharp sword aura. He did not hesitate to set up a barrier in front of him. Bang! The moment the black sword aura touched his barrier, a crisp sound was heard. It was actually his barrier that was pierced through in an instant and completely shattered. Jiang Yuqing was even more terrified. The Long Yuan sword aura chased after him with irresistible force and could be said to be unstoppable. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to block it, not to mention other things. Alarm bells rang in Jiang Yuqing's heart. He retreated again and again. However, how could the current him be a match for the Long Yuan sword? In just the blink of an eye, the distance between the two rapidly shortened. The powerful aura almost crushed Jiang Yuqing in all directions. Jiang Yuqing only felt that the surrounding space seemed to be gradually solidifying. Every movement of his began to consume more force than before. His eyes stared fixedly at the black sword aura that was charging straight at him. His heart almost stopped beating. Suddenly, he felt a piercing pain between his eyebrows, and sticky blood slowly flowed down. Jiang Yuqing gritted his teeth, and an extremely cold aura flashed across his eyes. Just as he was about to make a move, the sword aura arrived. Immediately, the sword aura was deflected and directly slashed across Jiang Yuqing's left arm. All they heard was the sound of bones breaking and flesh being sliced apart. Then, everyone saw something flying down from the sky. It crashed onto the ground. Looking closely, it was none other than half of Jiang Yuqing's arm. His forearm had been cut off by Chu Liyue's sword. Bang! Jiang Yuqing suffered a violent impact and also fell heavily onto the ground. He dragged dozens of feet on the white marble floor. A long bloody mark was drawn. Chu Liyue pointed her sword at him, and a cold smile appeared on her lips. If I can cut off your arm once, I can cut it off a second time. Now, do you admit it or not? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 891. There was complete silence all around. At this moment, everything in the world seemed to have stopped. All the light shone on the woman in red. Her clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. Holding the Dragon Abyss sword in her hand, she shocked the world. Her jade-like eyes were burning with a strong desire to fight. It was as if she wanted to burn all the grudges of the past into ashes. For today she had waited for too long. And that clear shout was like a sudden clap of thunder, clearly reaching everyone's ears. It shook their minds. Her body was wrapped in a shocking pressure, as if she was a god of war who had returned from hell. Intense pain came from all parts of his body, and the half of his arm that was cut off was bleeding profusely. In a short while, the ground under Jiang Yuqing was dyed red with blood, and he looked battered and exhausted. Chu Liyue had only used one sword, and Jiang Yuqing was beaten black and blue, unable to retaliate at all. Everyone was extremely shocked when they saw this scene, and they finally couldn't help but gasp in shock. Chu Liyue and Jiang Yuqing were clearly several levels apart, but with the Dragon Abyss sword in hand, Chu Liyue could actually crush Jiang Yuqing so easily. The Dragon Abyss sword was actually so powerful and terrifying. At this moment, no one dared to doubt the authenticity of that sword. Other than the real Dragon Abyss sword, what other object in this world could achieve such divine power? Chu Liyue's sword cut off half of Jiang Yuqing's arm, and also cut off everyone's doubts. Jiang Yuqing's mind was blank, and only that terrible pain came from all parts of his body, almost drowning him. He supported himself up with difficulty and raised his eyes to look at the woman in front of him. She was tall and slender and her back was straight. With the Dragon Abyss sword in her hand, all the light in the world seemed to be concentrated in her eyes. How familiar was this scene? He was in a trance for a moment. 2 years ago it was the same situation. She resolutely chose to commit suicide and destroyed Shangguan Wan's Yuan Meridian and one of his arms. After that, he spent a lot of energy trying to find a way to get himself back to normal. On the eve of the wedding, he invited her to the zither room by the lake to express his feelings. It really was her. But it turned out that at this moment, she was her. Jiang Yuqing knew better than anyone else that the woman in front of him was indeed Shangguan Yu. All sorts of feelings intertwined. Instead, Jiang Yuqing had never felt that he was such a joke before. She returned all the betrayal and pain she had suffered for her. When he was emotionally moved by her, he felt that she was very familiar I want to marry you to her. No wonder when he interacted with her, until he always felt when he thought of all the things that happened in the past, it was extremely mistook her for someone else like when she was standing on the bustling street with only a side of her face exposed. I see. He even thought that he had fallen in love with her, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale and dispirited. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. This face was so similar to Shangguan Yu's in the past. However, this gaze was completely different from her in the past. At that time she was noble, gentle, intelligent, and generous. She seemed to have endless patience for everyone. Her eyes were always bright, dazzling like the bright sun, and people could only look up to her. But now, after experiencing pain, she was tenacious and resolute. Her every move was swift and agile. Even though she was smiling, there seemed to always be a coldness that couldn't be separated between her brows. It was as if a thick wall had been built and no one could walk through it. Jiang Yuqing suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. It's really you? Back then he had planned for a long time and used a full 3 years to finally make a move on her, in order to ensure that nothing would go wrong. But he didn't expect that she would still be able to escape alive, change her appearance and return again. He thought that his plan was flawless, but it turned out that it was a failure from the beginning. How could this be? Seeing the Dragon Abyss sword fall and hearing Jiang Yuqing finally admit it, Sheng Wanwan's heart suddenly surged with endless hatred. She looked at Chu Luiyue in disbelief. She still couldn't accept all of this. The scenes that had happened in the past few months kept replaying in her mind. At that time she only felt that Chu Luiyue and Shang Guanyu looked a little similar, and she subconsciously didn't like them. Later she found that Chu Luiyue's talent and strength far exceeded hers, and it made her unhappy. After the trip to the Dahuang swamp, she saw Chu Luiyue as a thorn in her side, and she couldn't wait for her to die outside forever. She originally thought that everything had gone smoothly and that she could finally have some peace and quiet. However, she didn't expect Chu Luiyue to come back safe and sound. Chu Luiyue even made an agreement with a legendary fiend, plucked the dancing lotus and became much stronger. Today it was directly exposed that she was Shang Guanyu. Shang Guanwan suddenly rushed forward like a madwoman, and her expression was ferocious. "I'm going to kill you. You deserve to die. You ruined my wedding and robbed me of my throne. You bitch, you should have gone to hell long ago." Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered and she suddenly laughed. "Sheng Guanwan, shouldn't I be the one saying that?" Back then, it was these two people who had joined forces to destroy everything she had, took everything she had and caused her endless pain. Now she was only back to take back everything that belonged to her. Sheng Guanwan, what right did she have to say such things? Sheng Guanwan didn't care. She seemed to have gone crazy and the force around her surged wildly. That resentful and jealous expression made her already scarred face even more twisted and terrifying. At first glance she looked like a malicious spirit. However, she had just taken 2 steps when Chu Luiyue flipped her wrist, and the Dragon Abyss sword in her hand pointed directly at her. A black spatial crack appeared in midair. Buzz. Following that, there was a loud explosion. A formless and terrifying pressure suddenly swept out from the Dragon Abyss sword. The void was compressed by this force, and it started to distort and collapse inch by inch, crushing toward Sheng Guanwan. Sheng Guanwan knew that something was wrong, and a trace of panic and fear flashed across her eyes. She immediately wanted to dodge to the side. However, she was shocked to find that her body was already unable to move. The space around her had already been enveloped by the heavy pressure of the Dragon Abyss sword. Thud. Sheng Guanwan felt as if there was a heavy mountain pressing down on her shoulders, and she immediately knelt down. Both of her knees were crushed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 892. Her flesh and bones hit the ground with a dull thud, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking. It made one's scalp go numb. Sheng Guanwan's face, which was originally red from anger, instantly turned pale. The last trace of blood had also completely faded away. She couldn't withstand this terrifying force. As she knelt down, her body fell forward and she immediately spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. She was already injured, and now with this blow, she was even more dispirited and listless. She fell to the ground, and her hands were rubbed with bloody marks, which were burning with pain. The originally clean and tidy white jade bricks were stained with scarlet bloodstains, which looked hideous. Sheng Guanwan knew that it was her blood. She wanted to get up, but she found it extremely difficult. Every inch of her flesh and blood seemed to be suppressed by a great force, which made it difficult for her to even breathe. In the silence, the sound of footsteps could be heard from the front. Sheng Wan was kneeling on the ground. When she heard this sound, she subconsciously looked up. What entered her sight was a pair of black boots and red clothes. "Since you can't stand properly, then kneel and talk." Chu Liyue's voice came from above. Her tone was so light, but in Sheng Wan's ears, it was no different from deep mockery and contempt. Sheng Wan's blood rushed to her heart, and she clenched her silver teeth. "What are you doing?" She was just about to force herself to get up when she suddenly felt a chill on her neck. Her body collapsed again. Chu Liyue was holding Long Yuan and holding it against her neck. A bone-chilling coldness emanated from the thick and heavy sword. The sharp blade of the sword was wrapped in dense killing intent. It was as if as long as she dared to move, this sword would immediately take her life. Chu Liyue tilted her head, then suddenly leaned over and stared at Sheng Wan. The corners of her lips curled up, and the corners of her eyes and brows were incomparably sincere. She said word by word, "Speaking of which, this princess has to thank you. If it weren't for you, wouldn't this princess have to marry Jiang Yuqing? That would be terrible." "You." Sheng Wan was so angry that she didn't know what to say for a moment. When Jiang Yuqing, who was at the side, heard this, his expression suddenly darkened as his pale lips moved, but he didn't say anything. It was as if his heart had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife, and it was a sharp pain. He looked at the woman not far away. Her eyes were smiling and her expression was relaxed. Her words were clearly sincere. She really felt that it was a great blessing not being with him. All the gentleness and affection in those eyes had completely disappeared. He originally thought that it would be replaced by utter hatred. But that wasn't the case. She looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger. Other than the anger and resentment of being betrayed, there was not the slightest bit of unnecessary entanglement and infatuation. Jiang Yuqing looked down and suddenly laughed in self-mockery. That's right, she had never been moved by him, so how could she have such feelings? It's just. Sheng Wan suddenly recalled that Yang Qin, had once told her that Chu Liyue had taken the Long Yuan sword out of the Tianling God realm. However, she didn't believe it at that time and sent the royal family's elders into the Tianling God realm to check. They also said that the Long Yuan sword was still inside. She really couldn't figure out how Chu Liyue took the Long Yuan sword out and perfectly covered up this matter. However, she didn't have the time or opportunity to think about that now. The cold and sharp sword was pressed against her neck. Sheng Wan was terrified. She couldn't help but scream. "Chu Liyue. I'm the third princess of the Tianling dynasty, and I have the Shangguan bloodline. You dare to kill me?" Chu Liyue looked at her from above, raised her brows slightly and lightly said, "This Long Yuan sword is stained with the blood of many Tianling royal family members. It doesn't matter whether you're there or not." "Do you really think you're a big shot?" Sheng Wan's heart skipped a beat. She had never entered the Tianling God realm, so she didn't know the exact situation inside. However, Chu Liyue said that the Long Yuan sword had killed someone from the royal family before. How was that possible? One had to know that this was left behind by the Taizu. "You're spouting nonsense." Sheng Wan originally wanted to curse out loud, but the Long Yuan sword was pressed against her neck, so she didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Her voice also became much weaker. However, she couldn't take it lying down. She was forced to kneel on the ground and look up at Chu Liyue. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with jealousy. "Chu Liyue, so what if you're really Sheng Yu? Your physical body was completely destroyed back then, and this body doesn't belong to you in the first place, right? Even if your soul is still here, it's already a completely different body now. The bloodline flowing in your body is ultimately from a fallen family of a small empire outside the heaven's canopy. What does it have to do with my Shangguan family?" At this point, Shangguan seemed to have suddenly realized something and sneered. Shangguan Yu back then had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian and was a peak stage 8 warrior. And now, other than this consciousness that still exists from head to toe, what other part of your body is worthy of the title of Empress? You want to take back everything that originally belonged to you? Why don't you take a look at the current you and see if you have the right to do so? After saying that, she looked at Shangguan Yu, who was standing on the 9th step. "Father, I may have done something wrong, but I'm ultimately a descendant of the Shangguan family. And this woman in front of me has nothing to do with the Tianling royal family anymore. Father, aren't you afraid that her current body and bloodline will taint the legacy of the Shangguan family?" Shangguan was so hysterical that she didn't even care about the Long Yuan sword on her neck. In any case, today had already come to this point, and she definitely wouldn't be able to survive. In that case there was nothing for her to worry about. As long as she could make Chu Luiyue lose everything, she wouldn't hesitate to pay any price. This hoarse scream spread throughout the entire square. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Shang Guanwan's words weren't completely unreasonable. The person standing there now was Shang Guanyu, but she was also Chu Luiyue. Everything else was fine, but the problem with her bloodline was indeed not easy to solve. Many people secretly looked at Shang Guanyu, who was standing above, to see what kind of reaction and attitude he would have towards this. After this period of buffer, Shang Guanyu's mood had calmed down a lot. When he heard Shang Guanwan's words, he frowned slightly and his eyes darkened. There's only one you, in this world. Shang Guanwan's heart sank, and the smug and crazy look in her eyes suddenly froze. Then she couldn't help but sneer. Father, if you really disregard everything and acknowledge her again, you'll be letting down our ancestors. You may be willing, but our ancestors might not be. The current her is simply not worthy of being a member of the Shangguan family. As soon as she finished speaking, a deep voice that seemed to have traveled through time and space sounded between heaven and earth. Who said she's not worthy? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 893. His voice was majestic and awe-inspiring. It instantly enveloped the entire area. It was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat, and they subconsciously looked up. They saw that the void between the dark sky and earth was cleansed and ripples were everywhere. Then a tall figure slowly appeared. It was like an illusion, but it also carried an unparalleled pressure. It made people subconsciously submit to him. Some people standing nearby could no longer withstand the pressure. Their legs went soft and they almost knelt down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at him with different reactions. Shock, astonishment, uneasiness. Excitement, reverence, and admiration. It was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was wearing a long dark green robe. He was tall, straight, and elegant. His body was translucent and he looked like a soul. There were no force fluctuations around him. But just by standing there, he exuded an aura of nobility that was ingrained in his bones. Just when countless people were wondering who this person was, Shang Guanyu was the first to react. He widened his eyes in shock and exclaimed, "Master, you're so powerful." He exclaimed, "Taizu." This voice directly caused everyone to be stunned on the spot. Taizu, Taizu. There was only one person in the world who could make Shang Guanyu call him that, the founder of the Tianling dynasty, Taizu Shangguanjing. But didn't he pass away a long time ago? Rumor had it that he passed away in the Tianling god realm. Why did he appear now? Taizu looked down and his gaze became gentler. You're Shang Guanyu? Judging from his attitude toward you, just now, he's not bad. Originally, Taizu still had some complaints about Shang Guanyu. They felt that he had a lot to do with the current situation. However, seeing that he seemed to be full of love and care for you, Taizu's dissatisfaction lessened a lot. Even his attitude toward Shang Guanyu improved a lot. In an instant, the natural intimacy that originated from the bloodline made Shang Guanyu believe that the person in front of him was indeed Taizu. He couldn't hide his excitement and immediately knelt down to kowtow. Junior Shang Guanyu greets Taizu. Since His Majesty had knelt, the rest of the people could only follow suit. Everyone in front of and behind Lang Kuan Hall also hurriedly knelt down. Greetings, Taizu. There were too many people, and when they shouted in unison, their shouts shook the sky. Get up. Taizu's deep voice sounded. At the same time, everyone felt a gentle force lift them up. That is, the power of Taizu. Many people were secretly shocked. It was rumored that Taizu was at the peak of the 9th stage, only a step away from the peri-celestial stage. Looking at it now, it was indeed worthy of its reputation. Just this move alone was enough to easily crush everyone present. Chapter 894. Taizu had personally announced that he would become the emperor. Such a thing had never happened before, and it would probably never happen again in the future. To allow Taizu to reappear in the world and protect him in every way possible. Not to mention the previous things, just this alone was enough to secure Chu Liuyue's position as the emperor of Tianling. Shang Guanwan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. The last glimmer of hope in her eyes completely disappeared. How could this be? How could this be? Shang Guanyu should have died 2 years ago. How could she still come back? How could she still receive the support of so many people after destroying everything that she had worked so hard to obtain? Even the great ancestor was supporting her like this? Since Taizu had already spoken, what else could others say? Sheng Wan knew that her last bargaining chip was useless, and her heart was dead. She slowly raised her head and looked at Chu Liwei, who was standing in front of her. She was stunned for a while before she couldn't help but chuckle. Her face was filled with despair and mockery. "Ah, no wonder you were so bold. So you still had this last trump card. Sheng Wanyu, you're ruthless. Who can be your opponent? Who can?" If only she had known this would happen. She thought that she had won, but in the end she had suffered a crushing defeat. She had become a joke to the world. At this point she really didn't have any chance of turning the tables. Jiang Yuqing, who was not far away, frowned when he saw Taizu. The situation today was worse than he had expected. Even Chu Liwei himself was shocked. He couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly as he looked at Taizu. "Taizu, you..." She knew that Taizu was speaking up for her, but to give such a promise. It was indeed far beyond her expectations. "You deserve this." Taizu shook his head gently and said affirmatively. "Whether it's your talent, strength, or character, they are all impeccable. It's the blessing of Tianling to have you." Taizu said this with incomparable sincerity. If it weren't for Chu Liwei, he would still be trapped in the Tianling God realm, unable to see the light of day. As time passed, his final soul would very likely dissipate without a trace. The Dragon Abyss Sword has recognized you as its new master, and the Tianling Scepter has also recognized you. In this world, there is no one more suitable than you to stand here. There were many people who could obtain the recognition of the Tianling Scepter, but she was the only owner of the Long Yuan Sword. Now, you can be considered to have inherited my mantle. Why can't you immediately take over the Heaven's Writ? Chu Liwei coughed and glanced at his imperial father. Unexpectedly, Sheng Wanyu also agreed with him. Taizu is right. Had been very intelligent since she was young, and she had handled the affairs of the imperial court extremely well. Originally, when she was about to get married 2 years ago, I had planned to pass the throne to her. I didn't expect. A hint of darkness flashed across his face, but it was fleeting. Now that has returned safely, everything will naturally return to the right track. Father's body is weak and I haven't fully recovered. There are indeed some things that I can't handle. Why don't you officially ascend the throne today? Chu Liwei was confused. Why did these two people casually push her to the throne with just a few words? This doesn't seem too appropriate. The corners of Chu Liwei's eyes twitched. What's inappropriate about it? There are many happy events today and one more is even better. Taizu waved his hand. Everyone's expression became a little strange when they heard that. Many happy events? Taizu, open your eyes and take a closer look at the mess on the ground. Third Princess Sheng Wan and her newly married husband Jiang Yuqing are still covered in blood at this very moment. With the imperial family's dispute having reached this point, only you can say something like, there will be many happy things to come. The corners of Chu Liwei's eyes twitched, and he couldn't resist the attacks of the two for a moment. Sheng Wanyu clenched his fist and coughed. Look at father's body? I have to rest well. Can you bear to let father tire himself out? Chu Liwei was confused. Weren't you also strategizing when you were lying in bed for 2 years? Well, why don't we clean up this mess first? Chu Liwei glanced at the two of them and asked. The matter of Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wan hadn't been completely settled yet. That's true, I almost forgot about this. Taizu clapped his hands and immediately looked down. Other than these two, Xiahou Rong and the others just now, who else harmed you back then? Who betrayed you? Today, drag them out and deal with them together. Taizu could be said to be swift and decisive. However, Chu Liwei's brows furrowed slightly. She had basically investigated what happened back then. However, there were still some questions that she was still puzzled about. For example, why did Jiang Yuqing do this? He clearly didn't like Sheng Wan, or rather, whoever he liked wouldn't affect any of his decisions at all. In his heart, he only cared about himself. But why was he so painstakingly scheming for? There were so many people back then. Some stood firm for her, some ran for her, and some... Did they really betray her completely? She couldn't help but look in a certain direction. Mu Qinghe stood outside the crowd. His black armor was exceptionally eye-catching. As if sensing her gaze, Mu Qinghe also looked over. Mu Qinghe. Chu Liwei suddenly spoke. Hearing this, everyone quieted down and looked at the two of them curiously and uneasily. His forehead was pressed against the cold jade floor. A cold chill almost spread through his entire body. Mu Qinghe betrayed your highness and is a vile subject. Your highness, please kill him. Every single word and sentence was clear as day. No one present expected Mu Qinghe to have such a reaction. He didn't argue, complain, or protest. With just one sentence he admitted his betrayal so straightforwardly. In the current situation, wasn't he courting death? As long as he said that he didn't betray, or that he was forced, there might be a way out. But he didn't. If it was 2 years ago, who would have thought that Mu Qinghe, who was the most trusted by the princess, would come to this step today? If he had always been loyal to the princess after today, when the princess took over the imperial power and ascended to the throne, he would be a first-class meritorious official. Unfortunately, Jiang Yuqing glanced at him, a dark light flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He quickly lowered his eyes, hiding the expression in his eyes. Chu Luiyue looked at Mu Qinghe, who was kneeling below, with a calm and cold gaze. Everyone looked at her. This time, Mu Qinghe should only have a dead end left. In the silence, Chu Luiyue spoke again and asked, "What you said now, is every word true?" "Yes." "No lies, no difficulties?" "No." "Are you willing to die?" Mu Qinghe was still kneeling there. Previously he had been lowering his head, but when he heard this he finally straightened up. His face was calm. "Yes. Your Highness, please grant my wish." Every word and sentence indicated that he was ready to die. Chu Luiyue paused, then suddenly smiled. "The last time you asked this consort to grant your wish, it was to go to Dahuang Swamp. At that time, although her status was respected, her power in the imperial court was not stable. Mu Qinghe took the initiative to go to Dahuang Swamp to enlist in the army, to fight for military power for her. At first she did not agree. Dahuang Swamp was very dangerous. If he went there he would suffer a lot. More importantly, he might not even be able to keep his life. He was always walking between life and death. If he was not careful he might stay there forever. However, that was the only time that Mu Qinghe did not listen to her order and knelt outside her palace for a long time. At that time he also said, "Your Highness, please grant my wish." However, she did not expect to hear these words a few years later. He was actually asking for death. When Mu Qinghe heard this, his heart felt like it was stabbed by something. It was so painful that his body trembled slightly. His expression was gloomy for a moment, but he quickly lowered his head. "Your Highness, please." The remaining 2 words were stuck in his throat and he could not say them. Chu Luiyue looked at him and sighed softly. In that case, before she finished speaking, she suddenly saw Hong Yao, who was on Mu Qinghe's shoulder, flapping its wings anxiously. It flew around Mu Qinghe and got closer from time to time. It let out a rapid chirp as if it was saying something. Or, it was trying to persuade her. However, Mu Qinghe was unmoved. Seeing this, Hong Yao was so anxious that it turned around and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Everyone saw a ball of blue flame streaking across the sky. In the next second, they saw that Mu Qinghe's blue sparrow had already flown in front of Chu Luiyue. It flapped its wings and looked nervously at Chu Luiyue, as if it wanted to say something. It was so anxious that tears kept welling up in its eyes. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she reached out her hand. "Hong Yao." Before her hand could touch Hong Yao, Mu Qinghe, who was below, suddenly realized something. He straightened up and shouted with a frown, his tone warning. Hong Yao's body trembled slightly, but it still fell into Chu Luiyue's hands. Big drops of tears rolled down, wetting its fluffy feathers and falling into Chu Luiyue's palm, which was slightly hot. Chu Luiyue could clearly see that its eyes were filled with grievance and pleading. "No, no." At some point, Dumpling had also come out and squatted on Chu Luiyue's shoulder, watching this scene. It was rare that it did not make a fuss with Hong Yao this time. After hesitating for a moment, it flew over and circled around Hong Yao, seeming to be at a loss. After a while, it used its head to clumsily and carefully nudged Hong Yao's head. "Don't cry." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.